Jun Yi-Xie's true identity, the truth of the civil war in the Great Qin Empire, his so-called cooperation with Jun Yi-Xie, the military pay that Jun Yi-Xie received and the plan to send troops to Northern Li, the kidnapping of Mu Ling, and Ning Jing, and the sisterly relationship between Bai Yuqiao and Su Xiaoyu. Everything was explained clearly. Ning Cheng's letter was written to shopkeeper Luo, asking him to pass the message to Long Feiyi. He also cautiously asked shopkeeper Luo to confirm whether the seal of the letter had been opened a second time before replying. After reading the letter, everyone was shocked and silent. There were too many things, each more unexpected than the last. Everyone needed time to digest it. Long Feiyi, this letter hasn't been opened, right? Han Yunxi quickly asked. No, I just read it. Long Feiyi was very sure. After Han Yunxi said this, she fell silent again. She stared blankly at the secret letter, not knowing what to say. Ning Qing didn't disappoint her. Even if he misunderstood her, he still persisted. Not only did Ning Qing not collude with Jun Yi-Xie, but he also obtained so much truth from Jun Yi-Xie and obtained such a good opportunity. Han Yunxi looked at Long Feiyi and couldn't help but say, we were right. The civil war in the Great Qin Empire was really just a misunderstanding. It was really instigated by the Wind and Black clans. Their suspicions were right. Their actions at 100 Poison sect were also right. It didn't matter if Bai Yanqing didn't admit it, and it didn't matter if Jun Yi-Xie didn't admit it in front of everyone. Because Ning Qing admitting it was enough. If Ning Qing said this matter, who would suspect him? The D clan wouldn't and the East Qin people wouldn't have a reason to suspect him. With Ning Cheng's status and position, everyone in the world would believe him. Long Feiyi lowered his eyes and didn't say anything. In his heart, he was planning on finding Bai Yanqing to clearly understand the true reason behind the civil war in the Great Qin Empire. He never thought that this secret would be known by Ning Qing first. Ning Cheng's hatred towards East Qin was no less than his hatred towards Western Qin. At this time, Tang Li suddenly said, Big brother, can that brat Ning Qing be trusted? Why should we believe him? If this is his trap, wouldn't we have been played? Since he sent a letter to shopkeeper Luo, it means that Ning Jing believes him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have told him these secrets. Han Yunxi immediately refuted. She had absolute confidence in Ning Jing, so she had told everything to Ning Jing, including the true relationship between Tang Li and Long Feiyi, as well as the matter of Kangon Private Bank. Tang Li, Ning Jing is pregnant with your child. You have to believe in her judgment. Han Yunxi honestly said. Ning Jing's hope towards Eastern and Western Qin was not inferior to hers. When Han Yunxi wasn't around and Ning Jing was mentioned, Tang Li withered. If it was before, although he was very fond of Ning Jing, he would still be very vigilant when it came to important matters. However, since he knew that Ning Jing was pregnant, he didn't have any immunity towards Ning Jing. As long as it was related to Ning Jing, he would believe it. If this is a trap, it won't fool us for long. It's unnecessary. Ning Qing isn't that stupid, Gu Beiyue seriously said. Everyone looked towards Long Feiyi. It was useless for Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue to believe. The key was for Long Feiyi to believe. This was because Ning Cheng's letter could be considered a rescue letter. He wanted Long Feiyi to help him, cooperate with him, and join forces with him. Everyone waited. Other than being nice to Han Yunxi, Long Feiyi had always been hostile towards the entire Western Qin camp, especially towards Ning Qing. He had enough power to deal with the D clan, and he also had enough strength to deal with Jun Yi-Xie and the Northern Dynasty's emperors. He didn't have to work with the D clan. All he needed was time. Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment. Just as she was about to speak, Long Feiyi muttered to himself, the Black Clan. Jun Yi-Xie, that brat really hit it well. Let's join forces with Ningqing. Let him fight with the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Han Yunshi quickly agreed. Seeing that things were going well, Gu Beiyue also quickly said, "Fortunately, Your Highness stopped them in time. Otherwise, once Kengan Private Bank and Myriad Merchant Hall cancelled their cooperation, Jun Yixia wouldn't be able to get military pay from Ningqing. Not only would Ningqing be in danger, the D clan would be in danger, even Mu Ling and Ningjing would be in great danger. Now, all of their safety was tied to the same boat. Whether this boat would capsize or not, it was up to Long Feiyi to decide. As for Long Feiyi, he had already made up his mind when he chose to stop them at the first moment. Long Feiyi, whether it's East Qin or Western Qin, let's find Bai Yanqing and Jun Yixia to settle the debt of the Great Qin Empire. Han Yunshi said. Finally, Long Feiyi nodded and said, "Spring next year is a good time." If their alliance with Ningqing succeeded, they could hide it from Jun Yixia and let Jun Yixia and the Northern Dynasty's emperors fight for 3 months. When spring comes next year, the Eastern and Western Qin armies would be able to march north. Then, they would definitely be able to defeat both Jun Yixia and the Northern Dynasty's emperors. By that time, the D clan would have already tamed those 30,000 warhorses. They would use those 30,000 warhorses as the vanguard and give Jun Yixia a good slap in the face. It's a good time. Han Yunshi was overjoyed. Gu Beiyue's anxious heart also relaxed. If not for Ning Cheng's plan to deal with Jun Yixia and the hostages in Sky River City, Gu Beiyue was worried that Long Feiyi would refuse to cooperate with Ningqing. 3 months, that's enough time to look for the fire and metal of 10,000 poisons, Gu muttered to himself. If Long Feiyi and Han Yunshi didn't deal with the D clan, then the matter of the perplexing butterfly illusion and the poison sect would naturally come first. All right. Long Feiyi gave an affirmative answer. He and the D clan still had to put on a show or two. Otherwise, with Jun Yixia's personality, he might not trust Ningqing. As for the small matters, he could leave them to his subordinates. There was no need for him and Han Yunshi to show their faces. He and Han Yunshi still had to deal with Bai Yanqing. Unless absolutely necessary, Long Feiyi wouldn't expose their whereabouts. Brother, does that mean I won't be able to see Ningjing until next spring? Tang Li was anxious. After Gu confirmed that Mu Ling wasn't in any danger, he basically stopped caring about her. Long Fei glanced at him. Your wife's uncle will take good care of his nephew. You better behave yourself. If Tang Li tried to force his way in, he would definitely fall into a trap. At this time, he didn't want anyone to provoke Jun Yixia. When next spring came and he personally led his troops to fight, he would definitely settle all his old debts with Jun Yixia. Han Yunshi, on the other hand, was worried about Mu Ling and Su Xiaoyu. The fact that Su Xiaoyu was Bai Yuqiao's little sister was really out of her expectations. But she couldn't be impulsive. Although they didn't need Ningqing to tell them that Mu Ling and Ningjing had been kidnapped and taken to Tianhe City, Jun Yixia didn't know about the situation. Jun Yixia must be feeling smug right now, thinking that they didn't know about Mu Ling and Su Xiaoyu's whereabouts. The more this was the case, the more they wanted Jun Yixia to feel smug. It would be easier for Ningqing to do things on his side without arousing suspicion. Thanks to Ning Chang's timely secret letter, a trade war and a war had been silently avoided. Han Yunshi wasn't stupid enough to use Ning Chang's letter to convince Myriad Merchant Hall's Council of Elders. In any case, without Ning Chang's orders, no matter how restless the D clan was, no one would dare to make a move. As long as they didn't make a move, everything would be safe. Ning Chang's banknotes would definitely flow to Myriad Merchant Hall. Or perhaps, Ningqing would find a way to send a secret letter to Myriad Merchant Hall. At that time, myriad merchant hall's elders would come to find her to take command of the army and discuss how to cooperate with the East Qin army. Waiting was what they needed to do now. While they waited, they couldn't be idle. There was the matter of the perplexing butterfly illusion, the poison sect, and her dual cultivation with Long Fei Yi. Nothing could be delayed. Really, they were very busy. Han Yunxi was about to put the letter away when Long Fei Yi inadvertently caught sight of a line of words on the back of the letter. He frowned and asked, "What's that?" Han Yunxi flipped it over and froze. Chapter 988. Han Yunxi flipped the letter over and saw that Ning Qing had written a single line of words. It didn't reveal any useful information, but seemed to be a form of bargaining with Long Fei Yi. Ning Qing wanted Long Fei Yi to loosen some of the restrictions imposed by the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate on merchants, as well as lower the taxes on them. Otherwise, not only would he refuse to cooperate with Long Fei Yi, he'd encourage Jun Yixia to ally with the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Moreover, he wouldn't allow Ning Jing's child to be born. Han Yunxi gave a start and almost tore the letter to shreds. Even she was angry, to say nothing of Long Fei Yi. It was already difficult for the two sides to cooperate, but Ning Qing still wanted to threaten Long Fei Yi at a time like this. The South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate had indeed dealt a heavy blow to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's businesses. It was also the root cause of their decline over the past few years. Han Yunxi could admit that Long Fei Yi's original regulations were meant to restrict Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, but they were too harsh. Since both sides wanted to work together, Ning Qing could make any demands without reproach. Whether he agreed or not could be negotiated. But Ning Qing couldn't use Ning Jing's child to threaten Long Fei Yi. This was abominable. Did Ning Jing know about this? How miserable would she feel if she did? What did he write? Long Fei Yi urged. Han Yunxi dearly wanted to hide the truth, but she knew that she couldn't fool Long Fei Yi. She could only hand the letter over. When Long Fei Yi read the line, his face turned gloomy. "Cold," he asked, "threatening me?" "Threatening you." On the side, Tang Li quickly picked up the letter. It would have been better if he didn't read it, because he immediately lost his temper. "Bastard! I'm going to settle accounts with him right now." "What is it?" Han Yunxi pulled Tang Li back in time. Gu Beiyue and the others also saw the line of words. They looked at each other in surprise. "Brother, let's just kill our way over. Let's destroy the D clan first, then head north and kill our way up." Tang Li was furious. If Ning Qing was in front of him, he would definitely use the hundreds of hidden weapons he had on him to kill Ning Qing. Gu Beiyue did not say anything. He had seen through the whole matter in an instant. Ning Qing made such a request at this time because he didn't want to become Long Fei Yi's subordinate after cooperating with Long Fei Yi. If he could use this chance to threaten Long Fei Yi into lifting the ban and lowering taxes, then many of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's businesses would be able to make a fortune during the chaos of war. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium would then be able to recover its strength and make a comeback within 2 to 3 years. Once Cloud Realm Trade Consortium turned the tables around, the D clan would have more money and more confidence. At that time, even if the princess and Long Fei Yi got together, the D clan would still only serve the princess instead of Long Fei Yi. In a way, Gu Beiyue envied both Ning Qing and Ning Qing. Gu Beiyue owed the Long Fei Yi too much that he'd never be able to repay in this lifetime. Thus, he had to be respectful and courteous to the Long Fei Yi while pledging his loyalty to the princess. Ning Qing was different. If Ning Qing could seize this chance to turn things around, then Ning Qing would still be able to stand in front of Long Fei Yi in the future. Meanwhile, the D clan would become the princess's shield, one that wouldn't be restricted by Long Fei Yi or East Qin. Gu Beiyue would only hide these thoughts in his heart without saying a word. He glanced at Han Yunxi, unsure if she'd thought of all these things, but it seemed like she was still angry over Ning Jing's child. Ning Qing was too smart. He didn't use Mu Ling, or Ning Jing, but Ning Jing's child. That wouldn't threaten Long Fei Yi, but it could threaten Tang Li to death. Once Tang Li was threatened, Long Fei Yi would be in trouble. Besides Han Yunxi, Tang Li was probably Long Fei Yi's greatest weakness. Long Fei Yi didn't answer Tang Li, but looked at Han Yunxi instead. What do you think? Han Yunxi didn't answer immediately. She calmed down and thought it over. In the end, she said, Long Fei Yi, perhaps Ning Qing isn't threatening you, but he has no other choice. This is the only way to protect the D clan. Back at 100 Poison Sect, the reactions of the D clan's military and Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's elders had made Han Yunxi realize this problem. If she and Long Fei Yi were together, the D clan would continue to be loyal to her. When East and West Qin joined forces in the future, the Eastern and Western Qin factions would fight for power and influence. There would definitely be internal strife. She thought these problems were still too far away, but she didn't expect Ning Qing to start fighting for the D clan at this time. These old foxes are all meticulous and thoughtful. They're not simple at all. What are you planning to do? Long Fei Yi asked next. Han Yunxi cleverly replied, Long Fei Yi, you won't be afraid of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium if they make a comeback one day, right? Long Fei's ugly expression suddenly improved as he broke into a smile. Han Yunxi, he said, you're even flattering me. Han Yunxi grinned back. I'm speaking the truth. All right. I'll give the D clan this chance. Long Fei Yi immediately had someone bring over a brush and paper to write down a promise. As long as Ning Qing could accomplish this, he'd have the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate lift the restrictions against Cloud Realm Trade Consortium and reduce their taxes. Long Fei Yi was only worried about Ning Chang's threat. He really wasn't afraid of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium making a comeback. Actually, if the D clan was wholeheartedly loyal to Han Yunxi, he wouldn't mind helping Cloud Realm Trade Consortium make a comeback. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium had plenty of business geniuses that he cherished very much. Even Han Yunxi was surprised that Long Fei Yi agreed so easily, to say nothing of Gu Beiyue and the rest. After Long Fei Yi finished writing the promise, Han Yunxi personally wrote a letter in reply to Ning Chang's offer of cooperation. While Long Fei Yi wasn't paying attention, she secretly apologized for hurting Ning Chang's eyes with her needles. Manager Luo chose an envelope specially made for Kengon Private Bank and wrote a line of words on the seal before sending it back to Northern Lee's private bank by Eagle. With that, the matter had come to an end. With everything settled, the silent Gu suddenly spoke up. This brother of Ning Chang's, he's not bad. Let's be friends later. Gu might seem like a jokester, but he wasn't easy to get along with. Aside from Gu Beiyue, who else had he considered his brother? He remembered how he disliked Ning Qing back in the Imperial Palace. Why had his attitude changed so much? Tang Li couldn't stand it any longer and asked coldly, "What's that?" It wasn't clear whether he was cursing Ning Qing or Gu. Gu assumed that he was cursing Ning Qing. Anyone who dares to threaten a certain person is a real man. This old man likes it. As soon as Gu finished speaking, the teacup in Long Fei Ye's hands flew at him. Gu quickly dodged out of the way. Long Fei Yi sat lazily in his seat, but slowly raised a hand. Gu could clearly feel a powerful aura closing in on him. He was secretly alarmed. Long Fei Yi had only been here for a few days, but his internal energy had grown so much. Could this be the power of the Lustbite energy? Gu Qishao was about to test the strength of the Lustbite energy when Han Yunxi cut him off. Gu, she asked, didn't you have any news about the fire of 10,000 poisons before? Leaving matters in Northernly to Ningqing for the time being, they needed to find all the ingredients for the perplexing butterfly illusion as soon as possible. Otherwise, no matter how well they arranged everything, they wouldn't be able to withstand Bai Yanqing's interference. These 3 months were very important. Long Feiyi didn't bother to argue with Gu over the perplexing butterfly illusion. He asked coldly, what about the metal of 10,000 poisons? How did you find it before? Gu became excited at the mention of the perplexing butterfly illusion. He said, I really don't have any news about the fire of 10,000 poisons. I've heard of the metal of 10,000 poisons before, but I don't know if it's trustworthy. What is it? Long Feiyi hurriedly asked. The 7 fiends. Gu became serious. The 7 fiends. Stars. Han Yunxi blurted out. The 7 fiends she knew were also called the 7 kills. They were stars in numerology, cruel and inauspicious. Gu Qishao gave Han Yunxi a disdainful look before he replied, it's a dagger, one that's been cursed. It said that anyone who is stabbed by this dagger will be cursed. No matter where they are stabbed, they will bleed from their 7 orifices and die. That's why the dagger has the inauspicious name of the 7 fiends. Gu had heard of this a few years ago. He had been thinking about the metal of 10,000 poisons and the fire of 10,000 poisons recently, and suddenly remembered this. In the 5 elements, metal did not refer specifically to gold, but to all metals. No matter whether the 7 fiends' dagger was made of black gold, black iron, or bronze, they would all be metals. Han Yunxi was very surprised. She did not expect such a magical weapon to exist. She said, you suspect that this dagger is poisoned. So the person who was stabbed was not actually cursed, but poisoned to death. Gu nodded. Long Feiyi and Gu Beiyue did not say anything, but they also agreed with this view. Everyone was engrossed in the discussion. Long Feiyi immediately ordered people to gather all the rumors about the 7 fiends' dagger. Tang Li was the only one left, quiet and unhappy as he sat on the side, thinking about his Jing. In the next few days, Han Yunxi and the others waited for news from Myriad Merchant Hall while tracking down the whereabouts of the 7 fiends. They found out that the 7 fiends had appeared in a water city in Jiangnan. They made a plan to bring Myriad Merchant Hall to understand the truth. After finding them, they did not immediately set off to find the 7 fiends after settling matters in the black market. If Ningqing had mentioned the matter of being poisoned, perhaps Han Yunxi and the others' plans would have changed. Perhaps they would not have left the 3-way land so easily and headed south. Unfortunately, Ningqing had mentioned everything in his letter except for the matter of him being poisoned. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi's reply quickly passed through Kengan Bank and into the hands of Bai Yuqiao's people. As soon as Bai Yuqiao received the letter, she glanced at the seal to make sure it had not been opened. That night, she immediately found an opportunity to deliver it to Ningqing. She was quite patient. She waited for Ningqing to read the secret recipe and put it away before speaking. I've taken care of the matter. Is Master Ning satisfied? Not bad. Ningqing was not stingy with his praise. Bai Yuqiao inwardly let out a sigh of relief. Then let's discuss the matter of saving little Yu. Unexpectedly, Ningqing replied with 2 words. There's no hurry. Bai Yuqiao's expression immediately changed. Ningqing, what do you mean? Help me deliver a few more letters and we'll talk. Ningqing was too cold and indifferent. You're going back on your word. What do you want? Bai Yuqiao was furious. You can refuse, but I guarantee that you won't see Su Xiaoyu tomorrow. Ningqing sneered. Bai Yuqiao was stunned and couldn't help but shudder. She belatedly realized that Ning Qing was a wolf, a vicious wolf. How could she have been so careless as to cooperate with him? Now that Ning Qing had something on her, he was trying to threaten her instead of sincerely helping her save people. Chapter 989. Looking at Ning Cheng's cold and malicious face, Bai Yuqiao regretted her past actions. If she was not afraid that little Yuer would be tortured again, she would not be so impulsive. Without Ning Qing saying anything, she knew that Ning Qing would not let go of such a useful messenger like her. Now, not only would she not be able to save little Yuer as soon as possible, she would also fall into the situation of being controlled by others. Ning Qing, Su Xiaoyu is Han Yunxi's most beloved servant girl. If anything happens to her, you won't be able to explain it to Han Yunxi. Bai Yuqiao said angrily. She already has. Ning Qing snorted coldly. You. Bai Yuqiao was speechless. She narrowed her eyes at Ning Qing and questioned, "What exactly do you want to do? What do I have to do to make you willing to help me?" Previously, the situation was very urgent and the situation was not clear. However, after he received the replies from Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, everything became clear. He already knew what he wanted to do, but he did not need to tell Bai Yuqiao. Only a messenger who did not know anything was the safest and most useful messenger. Ning Qing only told Bai Yuqiao, "You, me, and Su Xiaoyu are all in the same boat. If one suffers, the other suffers. As long as you help me settle this matter, I guarantee that Su Xiaoyu will not die." "What do you have to guarantee me?" Bai Yuqiao was both angry and probing. "You don't have to believe me." Ning Qing shrugged indifferently. Bai Yuqiao clenched her hands tightly and wished she could take action. However, she could not. She was already in Ning Cheng's hands. She only had two choices. Either she cooperated with Ning Qing to the end, or she perished together with him. Bai Yuqiao took a deep breath and released her clenched fists. "All right, Master Ning, please tell me what you need." Ning Qing wrote a secret letter and sealed it in the same way. After ensuring that Long Fei Yi would not attack Myriad Merchant Hall, he did not need to be so vigilant against Bai Yuqiao. He did not need to beat around the bush and could deliver the letter directly. He said, "Send this letter to Grand Elder of Myriad Merchant Hall in three-way black market." He did not know whose hands his banknotes had flowed to. Now that someone was delivering a letter, it was more appropriate to write a letter and deliver it directly. Bai Yuqiao took the letter and left the tent. She hesitated for a long time before deciding not to open it. She really did not understand what Ning Qing was trying to do. In her opinion, now that Han Yunxi had publicly reconciled with Long Fei Yi, Ning Qing would definitely not cooperate with Long Fei Yi. Now that Ning Qing was working with his senior brother and had second thoughts, how could he remain undefeated against the north and south flanks of senior brother and Long Fei? Bai Yuqiao pondered for a long time but still could not figure it out. Actually, she did not think highly of Ning Qing. However, she believed that Ning Qing would have a way to buy time for her and rescue Su Xiaoyu. Bai Yuqiao lowered her head and pondered as she walked out of the racecourse. Unfortunately, she ran into Jun Yixia walking towards her alone. Bai Yuqiao's heart skipped a beat. She was anxious to find a way to brush him off. It was so late and she had to leave the racecourse for something important. Who knew that Jun Yixia would only glance at her and walk past her? Bai Yuqiao was alarmed and was full of self-mockery. She must have a guilty conscience. Ever since she was young, her senior brother had never cared about her. He did not even bother to look at her. He would only pay attention to her when there was something important. Just now, she did not have to be afraid. Bai Yuqiao deliberately chased after Jun Yixia and pestered him as usual. "Senior brother, have you heard about what happened to Master?" Bai Yuqiao's words touched Jun Yixia's sore spot. He ignored her even more and walked very quickly. Not long after, his figure disappeared into the night. Jun Yixia had always been certain that Bai Yuqiao liked him. He was certain that Bai Yuqiao would betray the entire world rather than him. How could he have known that Bai Yuqiao would hook up with Ning Qing? That very night, Bai Yuqiao delivered Ning Cheng's secret letter by flying hawk. But Ning Cheng's banknotes arrived at Myriad Merchant Hall before the letter did. They flowed from the taverns to private banks, then to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's private bank. As soon as the people there saw the serial numbers on the banknotes, they knew that they belonged to Ning Qing. They immediately handed them over to Ning Nuo, who was operating in Northern Li. As soon as Ning Nuo received the banknotes, he shone them under the candlelight to reveal the secret message Ning Qing had written on the banknotes. Ning Qing didn't write much, but he explained a few important matters. Ning Nuo hastened back to Three-Way Black Market on horseback. Currently, he had gathered the 5 elders of Myriad Merchant Hall and Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, as well as 3 of Ning Cheng's deputy generals from the Ning clan army. Everyone was gathered in a secret room in Myriad Merchant Hall to discuss matters. Ning Nuo was usually sloppy and careless, but he wasn't careless when it came to important matters. After showing everyone the secret message on the banknotes, he asked seriously, "Shall we invite the princess back?" Ning Cheng had sent out the banknotes long ago with only 3 instructions. The first was the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin, the second was that Ning Qing had been placed under house arrest by Jun Yixia, forcing them to cooperate with him, and the third was that the entire D clan had to obey Han Yunqi's orders. The elders and deputy generals of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium all sighed with emotion. They never expected or wanted to believe that the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin had been instigated by someone else. It was all a misunderstanding. They all lowered their heads, their expressions complicated. Back at 100 Poison Sect, they'd embarrassed Han Yunqi plenty. If they went to invite her back now, they'd be slapping their own faces. Myriad Merchant Hall's elders were all silent as well, but 5th Elder, who'd just been released from house arrest, was very excited. "I'll go. If you guys don't have the face to admit your mistakes, I'll do it for you. I'll definitely bring the princess back. I told you, the princess wouldn't forget her roots for love. Every single one of you almost harmed the princess." No one knew what they were thinking. Instead of answering the 5th Elder, Ning Nuo asked, "Where are you going to find him?" That stopped 5th Elder in his tracks. Ever since the incident at 100 Poison Sect, there had been many rumors about Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi's whereabouts, but no one knew where they were. 5th Elder rubbed his nose resentfully and said, "Might as well send someone to the East Qin army to find them. They'll definitely know where the princess and Long Fei Yi are. Master Ning's trapped in Jun Yixia's hands. If we want to rescue her, we'll have to work with the Duke of Qin." At his words, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's head elder immediately spoke up. "What a joke. What does our D clan savior have to do with Long Fei Yi? Find the princess and we'll talk things over with her." "Exactly. This is our D clan's own business, it has nothing to do with East Qin," someone from the military agreed. "But the princess has long allied with Long Fei Yi." 5th Elder refuted. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi's actions at 100 Poison Sect had long been announced to the world that they were back together. Deputy General Shui was furious. "That's the princess's private business. We're talking about the D clan's business now." 5th Elder gave a start before he grew angry as well. "We're not talking about the D clan's business now, but Western Qin's. It's also the princess's business. If it's the D clan's private business, why did you invite the princess here? Why did Master Ning make us listen to the princess's arrangements?" 5th Elder grew agitated and slapped the table. "Now that things have come to this and Master Ning's already spoken, do you still want to rebel? You've all grown wings now that Master Ning isn't here. Old man is telling you now, you can rebel if you want, but don't even think about getting any military pay from Myriad Merchant Hall. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire place fell silent. Everyone looked towards Ning Nuo and the Grand Elder of Myriad Merchant Hall. Fifth Elder wasn't the one in charge of military pay, but these two. Fifth Elder immediately walked to Head Elder's side and said in a low voice, "Don't forget, Kangon Private Bank is only helping us because of the princess. As long as the princess says the word, the auction house's business can be ruined at any time. How long can the D clan last with the silver in the storehouse?" Junie Xia must have spared Master Ning's life for the sake of the money. Not only did Head Elder hear these words, but Ning Nuo as well. Although Fifth Elder was impulsive, his words weren't wrong. The D clan could cling to their own course now, but how long could they last? Half a year. A year. Who would clean up the mess if Myriad Merchant Hall couldn't take out the silver then? Even if Master Ning was saved, he'd be hard-pressed to move a single step in the chaos of war without any silver on hand. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's elders and the Ning clan troops had no idea of Myriad Merchant Hall's financial crisis, which was why they were so arrogant. Both Ning Nuo and Head Elder were in a difficult position. They were very clear that the wisest choice under these circumstances was to use the princess and Long Fei Ye's relationship to cooperate with East Qin. But they were also worried that the Long Fei Yi would keep the D clan in check in the future. What to do? The secret meeting lasted until noon of the next day. Many people gradually approved of Fifth Elder, but there was also a group of people who insisted on defending the D clan's interests. Ning Cheng's silver banknotes only contained a few words, so why didn't he say more? Faced with this awkward situation, Ning Nuo rubbed his brows and realized that it wasn't easy being the head of a clan. Just as they were about to disperse, a page boy hurriedly delivered a secret missive. "It's from my big brother," Ning Nuo exclaimed. Everyone who'd risen to their feet was startled and sat back down. "Quick! See what it says. Is there a new development? Quick, take a look." Everyone was nervous and stuck in a stalemate. Ning Cheng's secret missive was like a timely rain in the rain. Ning Nuo's heart was filled with perilous waves after reading the contents, unable to calm down. This secret letter explained everything very clearly. "Young Master Nuo, just what did Master Ning say? Young Master Nuo, why don't you say something?" As everyone urged him on, Myriad Merchant Hall's Head Elder and Fifth Elder almost couldn't resist snatching the missive away. Ning Nuo recovered his wits, his tense face finally relaxing a little. "Master Ning and Long Fei Yi have finished discussing the terms of cooperation. The princess is waiting for us at East Origin Hall." "What?" Everyone was given a fright. Ning Nuo's heart was still thumping wildly. He wanted to laugh, but couldn't bring himself to do so. "East Origin Hall is East Qin's property," he said. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd instantly quieted down. Ning Nuo continued, "The Tang sect." Chapter 990. The Tang clan belongs to East Qin. Ning Nuo's words silenced the crowd. Many of them, especially those from the Trade Consortium and the army, looked like they were about to collapse. Ning Nuo continued, "Kangon Private Bank is Long Fei Ye's private property." As soon as Ning Nuo finished speaking, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's Head Elder abruptly clutched his chest and began pounding it with all his might. Fortunately, the people around him came to his aid in time, or else the pent-up anger in his heart would have taken his life. The others were all dumbfounded. They were so shocked that they couldn't move. They only felt that this was like a dream, an extremely terrifying dream. Ning Nuo's heart was stifled as well, but he held on. My big brother and Long Fei agreed that as soon as Jun Xia sends his troops north to start Northern Li's civil war, the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate will relax all sorts of restrictions on merchants and lower their taxes. Long Fei agreed, and my big brother has his own handwritten letter. Ning Nuo knew that if he didn't say this out loud, more people would end up like the head elder and stifle their own hearts. As expected, everyone exhaled in relief at his words, including fifth elder who'd always protected Han Yunxi. Long Fei didn't add any other conditions. Did he really agree? Myriad Merchant Hall's head elder couldn't help asking. He was curious as to how Master Ning had managed to negotiate with Long Fei. Honestly speaking, the D clan and Master Ning's circumstances didn't give them the confidence to propose such conditions to Long Fei. Moreover, a shrewd man like Long Fei should have noticed that Cloud Realm Trade Consortium had a good chance of making a comeback now that the South Central region's restrictions had been lifted. Ning Nuo shook his head and handed the letter to the head elder. Actually, he was very curious as to how Ning Qing had negotiated with Long Fei. After reading the letter, the head elder passed it down for everyone to read. It detailed everything that the silver drafts hadn't mentioned, as well as clear orders for the D clan. No one present dared to raise any objections. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's head elder said seriously, "If that's the case, then I'll leave the matters here to you all. We must hurry back to 10,000 Commerce Hall to make arrangements. There are many industries in the central and southern regions that need to be rebuilt, so we won't stay here any longer." Rushing back to make preparations and waiting for the ban to be lifted was one thing, but avoiding responsibility was another. This Grand Elder was truly afraid that Ning Nuo would ask him to go to East Origin Palace to meet the princess. As soon as the Great Elder of the Chamber of Commerce said that he was leaving, the military's Deputy General Shui also hurriedly got up. Young Master Nuo, there are still many details to be discussed regarding the acceptance of the warhorses. I will also take my leave first. However, Ning Nuo said, the people from the Chamber of Commerce can leave first, but the people from the military must stay. Deputy General Shui, go and make preparations. Tonight, you will come with us to East Origin Palace to meet the princess. As for how to cooperate with the East Qin army, it's up to you to decide. Deputy General Shui felt his scalp go numb at the thought of meeting Long Fei and Han Yunxi. But since Ning Nuo had spoken, he didn't dare to refuse. He could only accept the orders. Yes, this soldier understands. That night, Ning Nuo only called for Myriad Merchant Hall's head elder and the military's Deputy General Shui to go with him to East Origin Palace. The fifth elder silently looked at their receding figures with a face full of disappointment. After experiencing all this, fifth elder was even more dissatisfied with certain members of the D clan. If Master Ning's letter hadn't come in time, those people would have tormented the D clan and the princess to the point of no return. He was planning to go tonight and find a chance to secretly warn the princess, but Ning Nuo didn't let him go. As soon as Ning Nuo's group reported their arrival, Su Donglin personally led the way to the rear courtyard. Fortunately, Long Fei and Han Yunxi hadn't started dual cultivation yet. Otherwise, Ning Nuo's group would have to wait until tomorrow. After leaving the poison sect's forbidden grounds, Han Yunxi began to cultivate in the poison storage space. As soon as she did, she sensed that Lil Thing had begun to cultivate as well. If Lil Thing was working so hard, she had to work even harder. Only when her cultivation in the poison storage space was higher than Bai Yanqing's could Lil Thing be safe. Only then could it help them fight against Bai Yanqing. At the same time, it could help Lil Thing's poison fangs recover faster. Ever since leaving the poison sect's forbidden grounds, she hadn't had time to rest after dual cultivating with Long Fei every night. She would cultivate for more than 2 hours before she was willing to sleep. Then she would wake up early the next morning. She had been secretly preparing something because of her busy schedule, so she had to delay it. There were a few times when Long Fei Ye's heart ached when he saw her like this. After dual cultivating, he simply forced himself on Han Yunxi, tormenting her until she fell asleep. Every time this happened, Han Yunxi couldn't wake up early and unknowingly slept in until noon. Han Yunxi's mouth protested against Long Fei Ye's tyrannical method of forcing her to rest, but her body obediently submitted to him. Ning Nuo's group was brought to a tea pavilion in the rear courtyard. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi sat around the tea table. Long Fei Yi had his head lowered as he brewed tea. Han Yunxi had been watching them from afar. Gu Beiyue sat behind Han Yunxi, also looking at them with a faint smile. Gu sat next to Gu Beiyue, leaning lazily against the railing with his legs crossed as he sized them up. Tang Li sat behind Long Fei Yi. He was also looking at them, his handsome face as dark as the dark clouds in the sky. Forget the head elder and Deputy General Shui, even Ning Nuo felt a little guilty in the face of this scene. He was a little scared. He secretly rejoiced that Long Fei Yi wasn't looking at them. Otherwise, he really wouldn't be able to handle it. But as soon as he entered the pavilion, Long Fei Yi looked up. In this moment, Ning Nuo missed his big brother dearly. He knew that his big brother wouldn't have stage fright. He had a bit of friendship with Long Fei Yi back on Fishery Island, but things were different now. Although Ning Nuo was nervous, he was still able to keep his composure. He maintained his usual smile and bowed deeply to Han Yunxi. This subordinate, Ning Nuo, greets the princess. Seeing this, the nervous head elder and Deputy General Shui finally recovered their wits and hurriedly bowed as well. No need to be so courteous. Take a seat, Han Yunxi said mildly. Many thanks, princess. This subordinate will just stand. How could Ning Nuo dare to do that? Only Long Fei Yi and the princess were sitting at this table. Gu Beiyue and the rest were sitting behind them, so he didn't have the right to sit on the same level as the princess. Han Yunxi didn't insist. Instead, she had a servant arrange another chair for them, but didn't leave the head elder and Deputy General Shui behind. Once the three of them were seated, Han Yunxi said, "Since you're here, I'm sure you know about Ning Chang's situation. Let's not waste any more time. There's still about 15 days before the warhorses arrive within Tianning's borders. What are the military's arrangements?" Han Yunxi looked towards Deputy General Shui, who was very surprised. He had been waiting for Han Yunxi to show him who was boss and question him about the 100 Poison Sect incident. Who knew that Han Yunxi wouldn't mention a word about it, as if that incident had never happened. Ning Nuo secretly tugged at Deputy General Shui, who finally recovered his wits. He didn't have time to think about anything else and directly replied, "Master Ning's secret letter said that Jun Xia has arranged for several horse trainers who know how to control beasts. This subordinate wants to make good use of these horse trainers." "How do you use them?" Han Yunxi asked. Deputy General Shui snuck a glance at Long Fei Yi. Jun Xia will definitely believe the horse trainer's words. Jun Xia had arranged for the horse trainers to come. 1. He hoped to control the warhorses, and 2. He'd send a spy over. They only needed to beat him at his own game and make good use of these horse trainers. Then Jun Xia would trust Ning Qing even more. Ning Qing had to keep Jun Xia in check for 3 months and protect Ning Jing and the rest. This wasn't a small burden. If Jun Xia suspected him in the slightest, all of his efforts would go to waste. Han Yunxi nodded, then asked, "Jun Xia wants to use the Ning clan head to block the Great Qin army. What do you think?" "Princess, after 15 days, Master Ning will pay Jun Xia's military pay as soon as the warhorses arrive. Jun Xia plans to use 10 days to set up his plans and send troops north to attack the Northern Dynasty's emperors. This subordinate thinks that in these few days, the East Qin army can send out troops first and pretend to fight a few battles with the Ning clan army. Deputy General Shui replied. As long as the Eastern and Western Qin fought, Jun Yixia would trust Ning Qing even more. He betrayed the Western Qin and would also curry favor with Ning Qing. He needed Ning Qing to help him guard the south so that he could head north without any worries. All of this was actually Ning Cheng's idea. Han Yunxi and the others had already thought of it. Han Yunxi threw out a sharp question. She said, "Who will win and who will lose in these battles?" There were always winners and losers in war, and when there were winners and losers, there would be gains and losses for one side. Long Feiyi did not make a sound, but when he heard this, his lips curled into a faint arc as he continued to drink his winter flakes. Deputy General Shui did not think as he seriously replied, "Princess, Jun Yixia is someone who has led troops before and those horse trainers are not simple. We can't hide it from their eyes." Han Yunxi lightly said, "Continue. The Ning clan army has lost. They have abandoned Xinjiang County and retreated to Heang Pass. The Ning clan army has the red coat cannons and the weather is cold and snow. The East Qin army cannot break through Heang Pass, so the two armies are in a stalemate." Deputy General Shui seriously said. Han Yunxi felt admiration in her heart. Although this Deputy General Shui was rude to her at the 100 Poison Sect, now that they were truly working together, Deputy General Shui knew how to prioritize the army and was willing to abandon Xinjiang County. At this time, Long Feiyi finally spoke. "How are we going to arrange the time?" Deputy General Shui was a bit surprised, but he remained calm as he replied, "We still need to coordinate with the Ning clan head. I wonder if East Qin can cooperate." Only Ning Qing could grasp the situation on Jun Yixia's side. Han Yunxi glanced at Long Feiyi and was about to speak, but Long Feiyi readily agreed, "All right. This crown prince will have Bailey Qiyu contact you later. He will cooperate with you." When he said this, Gu Beiyue on the side silently laughed. Long Feiyi was truly an old fox. Leaving this matter to Bailey Qiyu was simply too suitable. When Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi worked together, the husband and wife were of the same mind. They both prioritized the overall situation and did not care about gains or losses. However, the forces under their command were different. Letting Bailey Qiyu handle this matter was to test whether the Bailey army was still dissatisfied with the cooperation between Western Qin and Eastern Qin. Secondly, it was to restrict Deputy General Shui. Thirdly, it was to train the two armies in advance. After all, at the beginning of next spring, the two armies would work together and head north to northernly. Han Yunxi could see Long Feiyi's intentions. Although it was a cooperation, Ning Qing held the majority of the power. Both armies had to cooperate with Ning Cheng's arrangements and make adjustments according to Ning Cheng's decisions. To be more precise, Long Feiyi was threatened by Ning Qing this time. Not only did he not fight back, he even took a big step back. After Ning Nuo and the others left, Han Yunxi whispered to Long Feiyi, "Are you giving me an tangly face?" Chapter 991. Even Han Yunxi had to beg for mercy every time she threatened Long Feiyi, let alone the others. But this time, Long Feiyi really gave in. Was this for the sake of Han Yunxi, the Western Qin princess, or for the sake of Tang Li's unborn child? Long Feiyi calmly replied to Han Yunxi, "For the sake of everyone in the world. I hope that next spring there will be no distinction between Eastern and Western Qin. This Deputy General Shui is much more adaptable than Bailey Qiyu. Bailey Qiyu should learn from him. A soldier has to be flexible." Han Yunxi stared at him for a long time. She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled foolishly. Perhaps it was the truth of the Qin Empire's internal strife that made Long Feiyi feel more at ease with the Western Qin camp. Perhaps it was because Long Fei's heart had grown bigger and his eyes could see further. Han Yunxi not only saw the dominance and strength of a leader in him, but she also saw the magnanimity of a ruler. She hoped that the first real cooperation between the Eastern and Western Qin armies would go smoothly and happily. At this moment, Gu, who had been waiting impatiently, finally spoke. Everything here is settled. Can we set off tomorrow? They had to rush back before spring. Deducting the time spent on the road, they didn't have much time to find the Seven Demons' dagger. Before Han Yunxi could answer, Tang Li finally exploded. He stood up abruptly and said angrily, I want to save Jing Jing. Ning Jing was almost 5 months pregnant. By spring, she would be 8 months pregnant. If Ning Jing failed, what would happen to Ning Jing and the baby? Tang Li couldn't accept it, nor could he bear the risk. Han Yunxi knew how big the risk was, and so did everyone else. However, if he rashly tried to save them, or if the Tang sect did something, it would put Ning Jing in even more danger. Brother, even if I have to give up the Tang sect, I want to save them. Tang Li said fiercely. However, Long Fei Yi struck a blow. Even if you give up the Tang sect, you might not be able to save them. If they barged in, they would be jumping into Jun Yixie's trap. If they didn't barge in, they would have to exchange the Tang sect's hidden weapons. How could Jun Yixie only ask for the secret weapon's secret recipe? They had to swallow the Tang sect. Furthermore, Ning's value. If Jun Yixie kept Ning Jing, not only would they be a long-term threat to the Tang sect, but they could also keep Chang's safety. No matter how great the temptation was, Jun Yixie wouldn't let her go so easily. Sect Master Tang, calm down. As long as Jun Yixie sends troops north, Ning Jing and Ling will be safe until at least next year. If you act rashly and affect Ning Cheng's arrangements, Ning Jing and Ling will be in danger. Gu Beiyue also comforted him. Once Jun Yixie sent troops, he would have to rely on Ning Qing even more. He didn't dare to offend Ning Qing. Seeing that everyone was persuading him, Gu also said, Don't worry. Ning Qing is a reliable man. He can't lose his sister and nephew, right? Tang Li, who had been holding back for a few days, finally exploded. Gu, are you fucking blind or deaf? Don't you know that Ning Qing is threatening my brother with my child's life? Who knows what will happen at Tianhe? Who can be sure that he won't sacrifice Ning Jing? What won't he do for his bullshit mission and bullshit cause? Didn't he sacrifice Ning Jing when he let Ning Jing marry into the Tang sect? What right does he have to use my child as a bargaining chip? What right does he have? What right does he have? Tang Li was angry and anxious. As he cursed, his eyes turned red. He didn't look like his usual sloppy and foppish self. Ning Jing must have never seen Tang Li like this. Would her heart ache if she saw him like this? Han Yunxi understood Tang Li's anger the best. She had seen Ning Jing's panic when she almost had a miscarriage. She knew how much Ning Jing had sacrificed to hide and protect this child. She pressed Tang Li's shoulder. Without consulting Long Fei Yi and the others, she made a prompt decision. We'll wait. We'll wait until Jun Yixie sends his troops north. We're not far from Tianhe. If there's a change, we'll go all out. Tang Li didn't say anything. He turned around and hugged Han Yunxi. Sister-in-law, Tang Li cried. Gu was speechless. He was caught off guard. Gu Beiyue looked away and sighed softly. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. He just patted Tang Li's shoulder. He hadn't seen Tang Li cry for a long time. It had been so long that he forgot the last time Tang Li cried. When he was very young, Tang Li would always ask him when he cried, Brother, why don't you cry? Brother, do you have a way to hide your tears? Please teach me. Brother, Auntie says that men are never allowed to cry. Does that mean I can't be a man? In Long Fei-ye's eyes, Tang Li would always be a younger brother who never grew up. Soon, Long Fei-ye pulled Tang Li away from Han Yunxi's arms. He didn't say a word. Just like that, they, who were originally going to head south, secretly stayed in East Origin Palace. They kept an eye on the situation in Northern Li while keeping an eye on Bai Yanqing's news. Long Fei-ye sent a group of spies south to find out more about the Seven Fiends' daggers. After Bailey Qiyu and Deputy General Xue exchanged 2 letters, the East Qin Army was the first to launch an attack on Xinjiang County. Ningqing didn't send any more letters, but he kept in touch with Myriad Merchant Hall. Under Tang Li's repeated requests, Han Yunxi personally asked Myriad Merchant Hall to take good care of Ningjing when they wrote back to Ningqing. In fact, Tang Li's original words were, "Warn Ningqing that if anything happens to Ningjing or the child, I won't let him off." Han Yunxi conveyed the words, "Take good care of the pregnant woman." Over the past few days, Han Yunxi had spent all her time cultivating the poison storage space besides her dual cultivation with Long Fei. As the intensity of her cultivation increased, her connection with Lil Thing grew stronger as well, but they still couldn't communicate with each other via telepathy. There was no news of Bai Yanqing at all. Everyone couldn't figure out what he was up to. Long Fei-ye didn't forget about another matter, and that was to investigate why Western Zhou's Emperor Kongqing had interfered with the 100 Poison sect. He handed this matter over to Chu Tianyin to investigate. Gu couldn't sit still. He followed up on news of the Seven Fiends' daggers while helping Gu Beiyue find the dragon pill in the black market. Everyone hoped that Gu Beiyue's shadow arts would recover as soon as possible. If Gu Beiyue recovered, he would be a great help to Long Fei-ye and Han Yunxi. Bailey Mingxiang also didn't idle around. She found a hidden garden in East Origin Hall and diligently cultivated. That afternoon, Han Yunxi found Bailey Mingxiang to teach her cooking skills, which was a rare opportunity for her to relax. Long Fei-ye called Gu over. Seeing this, Gu Beiyue also followed. Actually, Gu had been waiting for Long Fei-ye to settle the score with him. He knew why Long Fei-ye had sought him out alone. Seeing Gu Beiyue walk over, Gu shot a cold glance at Long Fei-ye, indicating for Long Fei-ye to send Gu Beiyue away. Unexpectedly, before Long Fei-ye could say anything, Gu Beiyue calmly said, "Seventh young master, how old are you?" Gu almost tripped. He turned his head to look at him. "You. What do you mean?" "There's something wrong with your blood. The little thing and I have long discovered it. I originally thought that you were a poisonous Gu human, but you're not," Gu Beiyue said seriously. When he and the little thing had discovered that there was something wrong with Gu's blood, he had suspected that Gu was an immortal poisonous Gu human. However, the records in the altar's secret room made him realize that he was wrong. There was a limited amount of poisonous Gu human fruits, which had long been eaten by Bai Yanqing. Back then, Gu Yuntian had only tested medicine for Gu, not poison. There was no possibility of coincidental cultivation. Therefore, Gu Beiyue still couldn't figure out what was going on with Gu's body. Long Fei-ye sized up Gu with interest. Gu felt uncomfortable all over. He said unhappily, "I don't know what the hell I am either. I also thought that I was a poisonous Gu human, but the records in the secret room said that poisonous Gu humans age. I seem to never age." There were many legends about poisonous Gu humans. They were immortal, and even invulnerable to weapons, injuries, and illnesses. They were also said to be immune to all kinds of poisons. Gu Beiyue had also mistakenly thought that they were immortal, but he only had a clear understanding after learning the truth in the secret room. Long Fei-ye had originally planned to figure out some other ways to deal with poisonous Gu humans from Gu, but it seemed like there was no hope now. He asked, "Does Gu Yintian know?" Gu shook his head helplessly. Gu Beiyue said seriously, "Stay at my place for the next few days, and I'll take a look at you seriously. If it's not poison, then it's very likely to be medicine." Gu's hair stood on end for some reason. "How do you want to take a look?" Gu Beiyue smiled. "Don't be afraid. I'll just take your pulse and check your blood. Your blood is very special." Gu Qishao was still doubtful and didn't trust Gu Beiyue. Long Feiyi didn't say much. He handed this matter to Gu Beiyue and was about to leave. However, Gu stopped him. "Long Feiyi, how about I make a deal with you? Speak." Long Feiyi didn't even turn around. How much did he not want to see Gu? "If one day we find out about the power that can kill the snow wolves, you help me find the perplexing butterfly illusion, and I'll help you find that power. How about it?" Gu said seriously. There was only one bottle of perplexing butterfly illusion, and it might be able to break his immortality. If he used it, he wouldn't even have the slightest hope. Long Feiyi sneered. "On what basis?" "On the basis that I'll protect all of you unconditionally," Gu said loudly. He was about to go moldy in the three-way black market, but wasn't it all for the sake of everyone else and on guard against Bai Yanqing? However, Long Feiyi said, "This is the price for not keeping your word. You can leave whenever you want." What he meant was that as soon as Gu left, Han Yunxi and the others would immediately find out about his immortality. Gu's face sank. Even after Long Feiyi's figure had disappeared, his expression was still incomparably gloomy. Gu Beiyue smiled innocently and said, "Seventh young master, let's go." Gu actually liked Gu Beiyue's smile very much, but at this moment, he had goosebumps all over his body. Before Gu Beiyue could even walk over, he had already fled far away. Since Gu wasn't cooperating, this matter was covered up and delayed. Everyone busied themselves while waiting. On this day, a piece of shocking news came from Northernly. Gu was originally lying on the roof, basking in the sun. When he heard Han Yunxi and the others talking about this in the courtyard, he immediately rolled off the roof and fell flat on his face. Chapter 992. Mu Ling-er was pregnant. The news from Northernly was that Mu Ling-er was pregnant. Gu crawled up from the ground and asked in disbelief, "Whose seed is it? Didn't Mu Ling-er revolve around him all the time? She even talked about Chi brother and Chi brother every day. How could she change her mind so quickly and get together with someone else? Wasn't this too fast?" When Gu asked this, Han Yunxi, Long Feiyi, Gu Beiyue, and the rest all looked at him with strange expressions. Gu looked at them in bewilderment. He didn't know what was going on, but he suddenly panicked. "Why? Why are you all looking at me?" he asked timidly. Everyone didn't say anything and just stared at him. The more silent everyone was, the more flustered Gu became. "Poison girl, say something." Han Yunxi didn't say anything, but she slowly narrowed her eyes and a murderous aura gradually appeared. Everyone else's expressions also changed. Long Feiyi looked disdainful, Gu Beiyue frowned and looked serious. Tang Li was sneering, Su Donglin's face was tense, and he kept shaking his head. Bailey Mingxiang's brows were furrowed and she was very angry. Gu instinctively took a step back and leaned against the wall. The uneasiness in his heart grew. He didn't ask any more questions and turned to leave. At this moment, Han Yunxi finally spoke and asked angrily, "Gu, you. When did this happen? Tell me." "Me?" Gu still didn't understand. "Gu Ling-er likes you very much, but you can't do this. You don't have a status, and you actually. How can you do this?" Bailey Mingxiang, who had always been quiet, couldn't take it anymore and shouted angrily. Bastard. Tang Li threw these two words over. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything and just snorted softly. Gu Qishao still didn't understand what these people meant. He couldn't figure it out. What did he do? He looked at Han Yunxi and couldn't bear to be fierce to her. He vented his anger on Bailey Mingxiang and Tang Li and asked angrily, "What do you two mean? Say it clearly. What did I do? What does her pregnancy have to do with me? How am I a bastard?" Tang Li rushed over and grabbed Gu Qishao by the collar. "You don't have the guts to admit what you did. Gu, are you a man? The child in Mu Ling, her stomach is yours. They're threatening you with your child, and you still refuse to admit it. Are you a coward? Don't tell others we know each other." When he said this, he was over Gu was completely. He allowed Tang Li to grab him by the collar without moving a muscle. Although everyone had clearly scolded him just now, he really hadn't thought of it that way. He thought they had misunderstood how he'd caused Mu Ling to be bullied and pregnant. How could he? How could he have done such a thing? Fuck. Gu came back to his senses and pushed Tang Li away. He looked at everyone angrily. "What kind of person do you think I, Gu, am?" Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Gu's reaction shouldn't be an act. Given his temper, he wouldn't dare to deny what he'd done. However, the news from Northernly was that Mu Ling was pregnant with Gu's child and wanted to threaten Gu to hand over a large number of medicinal ingredients. Jun Xia didn't appear directly. The one who sent the letter to Pilfiend Pharmacy was a rather famous pharmacy in Northernly. The pharmacy was called Yangxin Pharmacy, and its owner was surnamed Yu Kebang. Jun Xia probably didn't know that Han Yunxi already knew about Mu Ling and Ning Jing's whereabouts, so he went around in circles and asked Yu Kebang to come forward. The threatening letter clearly stated that Mu Ling was pregnant for almost 5 months. Mu Ling claimed that the child was Gu's. Yu Kebang asked Pilfiend Pharmacy to send 10 dan of each of 8 medicinal ingredients to the border. He would send someone to pick them up. If they didn't arrive within 10 days, whether Mu Ling could keep the child in her stomach would depend on luck. When Han Yunxi and the others saw the letter, they didn't believe it at first. However, when they thought about it carefully, there was no reason to not believe it. No one in Northernly knew about the relationship between Mu Ling and Gu. Even if someone knew that Mu Ling liked Gu, they wouldn't use such a thing to threaten Gu. Whether it was true or not, Gu knew best, didn't he? In short, the matter of the pregnancy and whose child it was couldn't be faked. Therefore, there was only one reason why Northernly would send such a threatening letter. Mu Ling was really pregnant and had admitted that the child was Gu's. Ning Cheng's previous letter didn't mention Mu Ling's pregnancy. Did Ning Cheng think that they knew about it or had forgotten? Mu Ling said it herself, and you still want to go back on your word. Gu, I didn't expect you to be such a person. Tang Li sneered. Gu's anger rose to the doorway. When he was about to refute, Bailey Mingxiang said, Gu, would Ling go back on her word? If it wasn't true, why would she go back on her word and ruin her reputation? Mu Ling wouldn't do such a thing, and there's no reason for her to do so. She's just looking for trouble for no reason. Han Yunxi also spoke up, feeling sorry for her sister. She, Gu had a lot of words to refute, but when he heard their doubts, he couldn't say anything. Gu Qishao, tell me clearly. Just what's going on? You. When did you? How? Why was Ling so muddle-headed? She clearly knew that Gu wasn't sincere to her, so why was she willing? Han Yunxi found it hard to speak. Gu was at a loss for words. He looked at Han Yunxi seriously and asked, Poison Girl, do you really think I'm that kind of person? I just want to know what's going on. Would Mu Ling slander you? If you really liked Ling why didn't you marry her first? You're ruining her reputation and bullying her. Han Yunxi retorted. Gu suddenly roared, I'm not that kind of person. If I really liked her, even if I didn't marry her, even if I didn't have a proper status, I'd still want her and get her pregnant. When he said this, everyone fell silent. Han Yunxi was stunned. For a moment, she didn't understand what Gu Qixiao meant. Actually, not only Han Yunxi, but everyone else also didn't understand. Gu said again, I don't even like her, so why would I sleep with her? When he said this, the crowd suddenly fell silent. Everyone was angry about the issue of reputation, but it turned out that this guy didn't care about a woman's reputation at all. His focus was on whether he liked her or not. Han Yunxi was stunned. She looked at Gu blankly and couldn't say anything for a long time. At the end of the day, you're still an animal. Tang Li scolded. That's too much. Bailey Mingxiang couldn't understand Gu's logic at all. Gu Beiyue was already shaking his head, while Long Fei was narrowing his eyes as he pondered over Gu Qixiao's words. Without a sound, he pulled Han Yunxi behind him to protect her. Everyone fell silent. Gu said angrily, where's the blackmail letter? Let me take a look. Han Yunxi was about to hand it over when Long Fei Yi took it and threw it to Gu. Gu skimmed through the blackmail letter, put it in his pocket, and was about to leave. Long Fei Yi finally said, where are you going? Gu was furious. To look for the child's mother. You're not allowed to go anywhere before this matter is cleared up. Long Fei Yi said. You think I won't go just because you told me not to? Gu asked in disdain. Go ahead and try. Long Fei Yi threatened. If I don't go, then, before Gu could finish speaking, he saw the threatening look in Long Fei Yi's eyes and suddenly stopped. Tang Li was so impulsive earlier that even Long Fei Yi didn't let him go. How could Gu do the same? What are you going to do? Long Fei Yi asked word by word. Gu narrowed his eyes and met his gaze. The atmosphere between the two instantly became tense. However, Gu quickly turned his head away and snorted. Nothing. I'm going to sleep. Remember to clear my name after you figure it out. It had to be said that Gu had a face that could topple cities and countries. He didn't feel out of place when he said the vulgar word I every day. Instead, he had an indescribable manly charm. He leaped onto the roof and continued to lie on his back, basking in the sun as if the argument had never happened. Everyone looked up at the roof, but they couldn't do anything about him. Su Donglin, come with me to Myriad Merchant Hole. We have to get to the bottom of this immediately, Han Yunxi said seriously. Whether this was true or not, they would know once they asked Ningqing. Everyone dispersed, but Long Fei Yi was still looking at the roof. Gu basked in the warm winter sun, feeling warm and lazy. However, for some reason, he felt an inexplicable chill. He sat down and looked down, only to see Long Fei's face as cold as Millennium Xian ice. You, come down, Long Fei Yi said. You, come up. Gu was on guard. Are you coming down? Long Fei Yi asked again. Are you coming up? Gu didn't give Long Fei Yi time to answer. He hurriedly said, if you're not coming up, I'll pull you down. He was about to leave when Long Fei Yi flew up and landed in front of him. Gu hurriedly retreated. I'll go down. I'll go down, okay. Gu immediately flew down and fled out the door. Unfortunately, just as he reached the door, Long Fei Yi landed at the door and stopped him. Stay away from Han Yunxi. Long Fei Yi warned coldly. So speaking, she brushed past Gu Qixiao's shoulder, leaving him alone with a complicated expression. Gu seemed to have just realized what he had said in his impulsiveness. He scratched his forehead and rubbed his nose, gradually feeling uneasy. How would Poison Girl look at him from now on? In the following days, Gu was very depressed. When everyone saw him, they looked at him with disdain. He didn't care at all. However, every time he saw Han Yunxi, he didn't dare to look into her eyes. Actually, what he said that day wasn't wrong. He was just like that. However, his behavior, his temper, and his principles were all ineffective when it came to Han Yunxi. Soon, Ning Cheng's reply came from Myriad Merchant Hall. The truth was revealed. It turned out that Mu Ling had pretended to be pregnant to cover for Ning Jing, and had found Gu to take the blame. Chapter 993. Ning Qing hadn't mentioned Mu Ling at all, but he'd left it out. After all, that wasn't the main point of Ning Cheng's cooperation with them. This time, Ning Cheng's reply was clear and concise. Right now, none of Jun Yixie's men, including Uncle Qing and Deacon Jean, knew about Ning Jing's pregnancy. He'd already had Bai Yuqiao negotiate with him so that Bai Yuqiao would send servant girls to serve Mu Ling within the next few days. In name, they'd be serving Mu Ling but in reality, they'd be serving Ning Jing. Bai Yuqiao had ways to prevent the guards from entering the tent to see Ning Jing and Mu Ling Still, they had to be on guard against Jun Yixie meeting the two of them. Thus, Jun Yixie had to send his troops north to ensure their safety. Otherwise, changes could happen at any time. This time, Jun Yixie had used Yangxin Hall to blackmail them because Jun Yixie trusted Ning Qing even more after East Qin and the Ning clan troops started fighting. He was preparing to send his troops north in advance. With winter approaching, Northern Li's supply of medicinal ingredients was limited. Jun Yixie already had a way to buy grain, but not medicinal ingredients. There were too many grain merchants in the world. Long Fei Ye's commander-in-chief's estate in the south-central regions had strictly controlled the flow of grain for the past year, but he still couldn't completely stop the underground trade. Moreover, the Tianan and Western Zhou both had grain merchants who specialized in war. It wasn't strange that Jun Yixie had a way to buy grain. As for medicinal ingredients, most of Cloud Realm Continent's cultivation was controlled by Medicine City and Medicine Ghost Valley. Jun Yixie didn't have much in stock, so he really had to use Mu Ling's child to threaten Pill Fiend Pharmacy. After figuring out the ins and outs of the matter, Gu chuckled. This old man's illustrious reputation was almost ruined by that damned girl. She's so warm-hearted. Indeed, Mu Ling was warm-hearted enough to joke about her own reputation. Everyone found it hard to understand, especially Bailey Mingxiang. As a woman, reputation was the most important thing. It was even more important than her life. But Han Yunxi understood Ling's painstaking efforts. She said, "Gu, don't blame Ling. She didn't do it on purpose." Gu Qishao was about to retort when Han Yunxi explained, before Ning Jing was kidnapped, she accidentally bumped into Linger and fell. What? Tang Li was stunned. Ning Jing almost had a miscarriage and was bedridden for a long time. It was Ling who took care of her. She probably hadn't fully recovered yet when she was kidnapped, so Ling had to protect her, Han Yunxi explained. Everyone finally realized the truth. Tang Li was an understanding man and didn't blame Mu Ling. I'll have to thank her properly after we rescue everyone. If she marries one day, my Tang clan will prepare a large dowry for her. Tang Li's words weren't simple at all. The dowry had two meanings. One was the amount of the dowry and whether it was generous or not. The other was that the dowry represented a backing force. If the Tang clan gave Mu Ling a dowry, it was telling her husband's family and the world that Mu Ling had the backing of the Tang clan. Han Yunxi was overjoyed. She was happy for Mu Ling-er. Mu Ling-er didn't have a family to speak of after the Mu clan fell. But when she saw Gu Qixiao's indifferent expression, she couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Would her silly sister still be willing to marry in this lifetime? Gu's mood finally cleared up. He was debt-free. He took out the blackmail letter and placed it on the tea table. What's the matter? Agree to their demands. Tang Li said anxiously. Brother, sister-in-law, how much does this cost? I'll pay for it. If they didn't agree, Jun Yixia and the others would definitely suspect Ning Jing if they found out that Mu Ling-er's belly was fake. To Tang Li, keeping Ning Jing in the Sky River barracks was already his bottom line. He couldn't take any more risks. Your big brother and Myriad Merchant Hall have to pay for it together, Han Yunxi said, before smiling at Long Fei Yi. Pill Fiend Pharmacy will give you a 20% discount. Tang Li didn't understand, so Gu Beiyue explained, Princess's words are reasonable. As far as this one knows, Northern Li's medicine storehouses have always been in the hands of the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Jun Yixia once worked with Medicine City's Mu clan in private and had discussions with Cloud Realm Trade Consortium to grow medicine on Northern Li's snowy mountains. But now they're all under the control of the Northern Dynasty's emperors. The Northern Dynasty's emperors have medicine, but Jun Yixia doesn't. The two of them are evenly matched, but the Northern Dynasty's emperors still have the upper hand. Han Yunxi nodded, then continued, when two sides fight, once one side gains the upper hand, the battle won't last long. Long Fei Yi naturally agreed with Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue's words. He added, the longer the civil war drags on, the greater the internal friction and losses, and the greater the demand. As long as Jun Yixia and the Northern Dynasty's emperors are evenly matched, the civil war will drag on for half a year before both sides are crippled. As Long Fei Yi spoke, he ordered, Su Donglin, send a letter back to Yangxin Pharmacy to prepare the medicine. Also, tell manager Luo to send a few carts of grain to the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Kangon Private Bank was a huge financial house. Naturally, there were some profitable businesses under the financial house, such as salt, sugar, and grain. Noble Consort Xiao had long reported to the Northern Dynasty's emperors about their lack of grain. Now was the time to find a few grain merchants to swindle the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Gu didn't like these political battles and was too lazy to pay attention to them, but he understood as soon as he heard them. He clicked his tongue a few times and said, Long Fei Yi, you're the most despicable one. Political tactics, despicable, scheming, shrewd, clever, and wise were all words that had different meanings in different situations and different people. Long Fei Yi was very clear on what he wanted, so he never cared about other people's opinions. He only knew that if he wanted to rule the world, he had to be unafraid of its curses. One day, he would be the one to write the history of Cloud Realm Continent. Then the common people would have their own opinions. Long Fei Yi said, everyone, go make preparations. There's no need to wait for the war horses to arrive. Ning Cheng will definitely give Jun Yixia the soldiers' pay and provisions first. Northern Li's civil war is coming soon. Since he'd already given Jun Yixia the medicine, Ning Cheng knew it was time to pay and provisions. Long Fei Yi's guesses were right. On the second day after Pill Fiend Pharmacy agreed to give him the medicine, Ning Cheng went to find Jun Yixia of his own accord. He said, I'm afraid we'll fail at Qingyang Prefecture. I've ordered the army to prepare to retreat to Heang Pass. Jun Yixia was a little surprised. He assumed that the Ning clan troops could defend Qingyang Prefecture for at least a month. How much longer can they hold out? He asked. They'll lose Qingyang Prefecture within 10 days, Ning Cheng's expression was heavy. You! Jun Yixia was furious. When did the Ning clan troops become so weak? Ning Qing gave a cold snort. He, if you let me go back, I promise I can hold out for 2 months. Ning Qing wasn't with the army, so his deputy generals had misled the troops. This was a very convincing reason. Zhu Nixia pursed his lips and pretended not to hear. His hand tapped on the map on the table in a hurry, revealing his inner uneasiness. Ning Cheng's lips curved into a cold smile as he stood in the shadows, unmoving. The phoenix feather mask covered one of his eyes. His other eye was hidden in the shadows, and his gaze was deep and cold. It was even more unfathomable than the mysterious phoenix feather mask. Zhu Nixia pondered for a long time before he finally cracked a joke. Ning Cheng, you don't have to go back. The warhorses should arrive in Tianning in 7 days or so. Why don't you give them their pay and provisions first? Ning Cheng was waiting for Zhu Nixia to say those words, but he pretended to hesitate. How much do you want? Previously, when Zhu Nixia had demanded a lion's share of 1 billion, Ning Cheng had haggled and promised to give him 500 million as soon as they got the horses. The remaining 500 million would be given later. Ning Cheng wasn't just a soldier, but a merchant as well. Although he had been quiet in the army these days, he had long settled Zhu Nixia's debts. Zhu Nixia's current expenses were nothing more than a few. The first was the pay and provisions for his own cavalry, the second was the pay and provisions for the various powers in Northern Li, the third was the cost of roping in the middle powers, and the fourth was the cost of buying and transporting horses from Winter Crow country. Currently, the second batch of horses numbered around 30,000 and were about to arrive at Sky River City. If not for the tight costs, they would have arrived a few days ago. Meanwhile, the third batch of horses was still in Winter Crow country and had yet to be paid. Zhu Nixia's plan was to use the second batch of horses to attack the Northern Dynasty's Emperor's forces from the central and southern regions of Northern Li. Zhu Nixia was in the southwest, while the Winter Crow country was in the northwest. Once the pay and provisions were in place, he could send someone to Winter Crow country to bring back the third batch of horses. At the same time, he could lead his cavalry to attack the Northern Dynasty's emperors from the northwest. In any case, Zhu Nixia had made ample preparations to attack the Northern Dynasty's emperors from 3 sides. Everything was ready, except for money. He wasn't in a rush, but now that the Ning clan troops were being routed, he had to be on guard against the Long Fei Yi for 3 months. Thus, the sooner Northern Li's civil war broke out, the safer his rear would be. 200 million. Compared to the agreed-upon 500 million, Zhu Nixia could be considered to have made a profit this time. Seeing Ning Qing hesitate, he said seriously, Ning Qing, the sooner I deal with the Northern Dynasty's emperors, the sooner I can go down south to help you. Think carefully, 100 million. Ning Qing acted as if there was no room for discussion. It's enough for your expenses for 3 months and the debt from the Winter Crow country. I'm making an exception. As long as the horses are in the hands of the Ning clan troops, the remaining money will not be reduced. 100 million was far more than enough for Zhu Nixia to fight against the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Ning Qing didn't plan to give Zhu Nixia any more money. He also understood that Zhu Nixia couldn't be too weak. Once he was too weak, he would be suppressed by the Northern Dynasty's emperors, and this war wouldn't last long. A war that didn't last long would only end with one side losing. It would never end with both sides suffering heavy losses. Spending some money to let Zhu Nixia deal with the Northern Dynasty's emperors was better than the Ning clan troops charging him personally. With the agreement in place, Zhu Nixia didn't force Ning Qing. He also knew that 100 million was enough for him to spend a lot. Just like that, Ning Qing straightforwardly gave Zhu Nixia 2 gold cards and told him the designated bank. He also wrote a letter for him to withdraw the money. A few days later, Han Yunxi and the others received news of the civil war in Northernly at the three-way black market. Zhu Nixia was waiting for the second batch of horses and cavalry to get used to each other. The forces in the south and central regions were the ones mobilizing the troops. However, after waiting for another 2 days, Han Yunxi and the others received news from Ningqing. Zhu Nixia's beast tamers were very good at controlling the horses. In a few days, Zhu Nixia would send troops up north. And it was also in these few days that Zhu Nixia would make arrangements for Ningjing, Muling, and Su Xiaoyu. Chapter 994. Zhu Nixia was ready to send his troops to the north at any time. Han Yunxi and the others were waiting. Ning Cheng was also waiting for Zhu Nixia to make arrangements for Su Xiaoyu and the other hostages. Bringing hostages into battle was just asking for trouble. Zhu Nixia was not that impulsive. He would either keep the hostages imprisoned in Tianhe City or secretly transfer them to another place. Early in the morning, Zhu Nixia personally came to find Ningqing. "I'll take you to a good place. Do you want to come?" he asked with a smile. Recently, his mood had been very good. "Where?" Ningqing asked. "Hee, you'll know when we get there." Zhu Nixia gave a look and the attendant came over to help Ningqing put on the blindfold. Ningqing more or less guessed something, but he did not ask. Under the guidance of the attendant, he followed Zhu Nixia into the carriage. Along the way, Ningqing did not say anything. He silently calculated the time, according to the bumpiness of the carriage, the terrain, and the road conditions. The carriage ran very fast. They only got off when it was close to noon. Zhu Nixia seemed to be afraid of revealing something, so he did not say a word. After walking for a while, Zhu Nixia personally took off Ningqing's blindfold. Ningqing then realized that Zhu Nixia had not only brought him, but also Ningjing and the others. Ningqing glanced and found that Ningjing, Mulinger, Su Xiaoyu, Deacon Jean, and Uncle Qing had all come. As for Bai Yuqiao, she was standing behind them with an unsightly expression. They were in a dense forest. It was so dense that they could not see the road. Not far away, there were 2 small courtyards. The walls were quite high. Under the cover of the trees, it was very hidden. If the sky was a little darker, he would not be able to see the outline of the house. Ningqing quickly understood that Zhu Nixia intended to imprison the hostages here. However, there was nothing special about this place other than the fact that it was hidden. Fortunately, he had the foresight to find an opportunity in the past few days to tell Ningjing everything that needed to be told. Otherwise, he would never have the chance to talk to Ningjing alone again. "Zhu Nixia, what are you doing? If you have the guts, go fight with my sister one-on-one. What's the point of kidnapping me?" Mu Linger scolded angrily. Ningjing was silent. Although she was covered by a loose skirt, she still stood behind Mu Linger and tried to straighten her back, afraid that Zhu Nixia would notice something was wrong. Su Xiaoyu was still a little unsteady on her feet and had to be supported by a servant girl. She looked at everyone with shifty eyes. No one knew that she was thinking about her real name in her heart and did not say anything. Zhu Nixia looked towards Mu Linger and suddenly opened his mouth to roar at her. Mu Linger was shocked and retreated a few steps before scolding, "Lunatic, I'm not afraid of you." Who would have thought that as soon as he finished speaking, waves of tiger roars suddenly came from all directions, causing the entire dense forest to tremble. There were tigers. And there were quite a few of them. Everyone finally realized the danger of this place. Mu Linger was alarmed. Hearing the bursts of tiger roar, she only felt her hair stand on end. Heavens, Zhu Nixia actually raised tigers to guard them. This guy was really a lunatic. She obediently shut her mouth, afraid that if she spoke any more, she would attract the tiger's attention and become the target of their attack. Ning Ching pondered in his heart. The Black Clan understood the language of beasts and were good at controlling animals. The tigers around them must have been domesticated by Junie Xia. Junie Xia locked the hostages here. Not only did he arrange for poison guards to guard them, he also arranged for a group of tigers to guard them. This defense was indeed very thorough and tight. If it wasn't for Bai Yuqiao, this insider, saving Ning Jing and the others would be harder than ascending to the heavens. Ning Ching inadvertently looked towards Bai Yuqiao and saw that Bai Yuqiao's brows were tightly knitted. All his attention was on Su Xiaoyu. Su Xiaoyu stays. Bring the others in. Junie Xia lazily said. A complicated look flashed past Ning Cheng's eyes, but he still didn't say anything. He originally thought that Junie Xia would leave Uncle Cheng and Deacon Jean by his side. From the looks of it, Junie Xia didn't leave anyone useful to him. Mu Ling struggled with all her might, but she was the first one to be sent through the door. Deacon Jean was very well behaved. He didn't need the attendants to escort him and walked in by himself. Ning Jing turned around and looked towards Ning Ching. Junie Xia, what right do you have to lock me and Mu Ling together? If you let me stay by my brother's side, I promise to help you get the Tang sect's most powerful hidden weapon. Ning Jing was putting on an act. She couldn't wait for Junie Xia to leave her here and not care about her. Uncle Cheng was really unwilling, but he acted out of character. He didn't make a fuss and obediently followed the attendants. The Tang sect. You don't have to be anxious. When this prince and your brother return in triumph, this prince will definitely discuss with the Tang sect master how to ransom you back. Junie Xia looked towards Ning Ching and asked, don't you agree? You decide, Ning Ching said coldly. Junie Xia had brought him here today to let him personally witness the dangers of Tiger's prison and to let him personally see Ning Jing being locked up. He was undoubtedly warning him that if he dared to play any tricks in the future, Ning Jing wouldn't have an easy time. When the time comes, you just have to return Mu Ling, to me. Let's make it clear that this hostage is mine, Ning Ching added. No problem. Junie Xia laughed heartily. She was already locked up here. When the time came, it was up to him to decide how to use her. Ning Jing was his chess piece to pin down Ning Ching, and also a chess piece to rope in the Tang sect in the future. Mu Ling was an important bargaining chip for him to use against Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi in the future. These people were too important. He had no choice but to use Tiger's prison to imprison them. After taking them in, Junie Xia said to Bai Yuqiao, lock Su Xiaoyu up in the dungeon. I'll leave this place to you. If you still can't find out the whereabouts of the perplexing butterfly illusion before I return, you don't have to stay by my side anymore. Bai Yuqiao's heart was incomparably heavy, but he still forced a smile. Senior brother, this is Tiger's prison. Forget about the fact that no one can find this place. Even if someone could, they wouldn't be able to enter. I don't want to stay. It's so boring. I want to go to war with you. Junie Xia glanced at him haughtily. If you don't want to stay, you can scram right now. Bai Yuqiao immediately lowered his head and shouted at Su Xiaoyu exasperatedly, what are you looking at? Come with me. After leading Bai Yuqiao and Su Xiaoyu into another small courtyard, Junie Xia finally looked around and clapped his hands. Very quickly, several tigers slowly walked out from the surrounding forest. These tigers were all white tigers. However, unlike the average white tiger, these tigers' eyes were scarlet red. Each of them stared at Ning Ching like a tiger eyeing its prey, as if they could pounce on Ning Ching at any moment to tear him apart and devour him. Poison corpses. Ning Ching couldn't help but raise his guard. Zhu Nixia had many poison men under his command, and he had also raised some poison corpses. Humans could be used to raise poison, and so could tigers. If these tigers were raised by Zhu Nixia, then it wouldn't be difficult to raise them as poison. Ha, Honorable Ning's knowledge is not small. Zhu Nixia laughed. This is the first time I've seen it. Ning Qing said as he observed these white tigers. There were a total of 6 of them, and although they were eyeing him covetously, without Ning Cheng's next order, they didn't move at all. Since they were poison corpses, it wouldn't be easy for Bai Yuqiao to kill these tigers with poison. Ning Qing finally understood why Bai Yuqiao's expression was so ugly just now. However, he still had some questions that he couldn't figure out, and he had to ask Bai Yuqiao. Zhu Nixia waved his hand and summoned a red-eyed white tiger. Once the red-eyed white tiger approached him, it meekly lay down at his feet. Zhu Nixia gently stroked the tiger's forehead and smiled at Ning Qing, saying, "Although my black tribe can speak the language of beasts, it isn't easy to tame such ferocious beasts. I spent several years to tame them. Ning Qing, when we return in triumph, I'll give you one." "Not interested. What's mine, I don't want less." Ning Qing wasn't polite at all. Zhu Nixia laughed, straightforward. "Let's go. Rest well tonight. Tomorrow, we'll head north with my troops and gallop through the grasslands." Since they were setting out tomorrow, Ning Qing would only have a chance to see Bai Yuqiao tonight and deliver the secret letter. He looked towards the courtyard not far away, unsure if Bai Yuqiao would be able to leave this place tonight. Ning Qing was still blindfolded before he was sent away. The time spent on the way back was much shorter than the time spent on the way to go. The way to go and the way back was definitely different. At night, Zhu Nixia invited Ning Qing to the barracks to drink. Late at night, he ordered someone to send him back to the barracks. Ning Qing stood outside the barracks for a moment. He really hoped that when he went in, he would see Bai Yuqiao already waiting for him. Unfortunately, when he went in, there were only 2 attendants in the barracks. It was already late at night. Could Bai Yuqiao still come? That night, Ning Qing sat leaning against the bed with a finished letter in his hands as he waited. Unknowingly, time passed. Seeing that the sun was about to rise, many soldiers in the barracks had already woken up. If Bai Yuqiao still didn't come, he wouldn't have a chance to see her alone. Just when Ning Qing was about to give up, Bai Yuqiao suddenly barged in. She gave silver to the soldier in the tent, and whispered a few words to him, and he went out. Ning Qing quickly stood up. Before he could say anything, Bai Yuqiao said, "Ning Qing, I really can't follow the army. That place is called Tiger's Prison. I know where it is, but I can't bring anyone out. I'll ask you one last time, can you save my little sister or not?" "I can't save her, but Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi can definitely save her," Ning Qing replied in a low voice. Bai Yuqiao was shocked. Bai Yuqiao always knew that Ning Qing wasn't sincere in cooperating with her senior brother, but she never thought that Ning Qing would actually work with Long Fei Yi. So, the East Qin army and the Ning family army's recent battles were just an act. They were working together to harm her senior brother. "You just need to help Ning Jing send a letter. I promise that before Zhu Nixia comes back, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi will definitely come to save them," Ning Qing said. If Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi worked together, even her master would be afraid, not to mention her senior brother's white tigers. Bai Yuqiao was suddenly enlightened. "Ning Qing, you want to reap the benefits. You're so despicable. You don't have to join us, Su Xiaoyu can also join." Ning Qing had an indifferent expression, only, "You'll have to bear the consequences." At this time, Ning Qing dared to tell Bai Yuqiao everything. He wasn't afraid that Bai Yuqiao would tell on him. You promised me you wouldn't kill my senior brother. Bai Yuqiao was excited. This was her bottom line. Don't worry, I can still spare his lowly life. When Ning Qing said this, his heart was cold. If he didn't let Jun Yixie die, then Jun Yixie's life would be worse than death. Chapter 995. Ning Qing handed the prepared secret letter to Bai Yuqiao. Send it to Myriad Merchant Hall immediately. Also, if news of Ning Jing's pregnancy gets out, our cooperation will be terminated. Apart from the fact that Bai Yuqiao couldn't rescue them, she still had a lot of power in Tiger's prison. She could arrange for her men to guard Ning Jing and Mu Ling. At this critical juncture, even if Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi could come to rescue them, they couldn't act rashly. Otherwise, Jun Yixie would definitely change his mind and be more cautious about sending troops north. Therefore, the only thing Ning Qing could do now was to protect Mu Ling and Ning Jing for a limited time. Bai Yuqiao's defection was his fortune, but it was even more so for Ning Jing and Mu Ling. If it weren't for Bai Yuqiao, no one would have known that the situation would develop to this point. Bai Yuqiao had no choice. She fiercely snatched the secret letter and stuffed it into her sleeve. Ning Qing, remember what you said today. My senior brother is about to lose his life. I'll definitely make you pay for it. Bai Yuqiao hurriedly left. Ning Qing exhaled. He knew that the matter was settled. All that was left was to wait. If Jun Yixie found out about today's arrangement one day, it would greatly facilitate the cooperation between Ning Qing and Long Feiyi. How much would he regret it? When Han Yunxi and the others received Ning Chang's last letter, it was already early in the morning. The civil war in Northern Li had already begun. When Han Yunxi and the others received news of the civil war and Ning Chang's letter, they could finally relax for a while. The situation was better than they'd expected, and it was also a few days earlier than they'd expected. As long as they could confirm that Ning Jing and Ling were safe for the time being, they could rest assured and head south. Bai Yuqiao not only sent a secret letter from Ning Qing, but also a secret letter from Ning Jing. This secret letter was naturally for Tang Li. Tang Li squatted at the side and watched quietly. There wasn't much content, but he read it 3 times and started from the first word again. Tang Li, what's in the letter? Long Feiyi asked. He wrote it for me. Tang Li answered. With his reply, everyone knew that this letter had nothing to do with the big picture. It was just a private conversation between the couple. Actually, Ning Chang's secret letter didn't specify the location of Tiger's prison, but Ning Jing's letter was very clear. She'd asked Bai Yuqiao about it in detail. No one knew what else Ning Jing wrote, but Tang Li was actually very calm. He didn't make a fuss and even took the initiative to say, "Big brother, you should go and come back early. I'll wait here. If there's any news, I'll immediately report it to you." He already knew where his wife and children were imprisoned, but he could still calm down and wait. What kind of reason did he need? What did Ning Jing's letter say? Everyone guessed that Tang Li's calmness had something to do with Ning Jing's letter, but they didn't ask. "Princess, Your Highness, this subordinate will be a burden if I follow you south. How about this subordinate also stay? First, I can help sect Master Tang, and second, it'll be easier for me to deal with Medical City and Pilfine Pharmacy," Gu Beiyue said seriously. The 3-way black market really did need someone to stay behind to discuss and communicate with Myriad Merchant Hall. As the son-in-law of the D clan, Tang Li was the most suitable candidate. Tang Li was impatient, so Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi couldn't be more at ease with someone as calm as Gu Beiyue helping him. The two of them immediately nodded in agreement. The sooner they went south, the sooner they could come back to save the people. When spring came next year, Jun Xia and the Northern Dynasty's emperors would be almost done fighting. When they came back, they would first save the people and then slowly deal with Jun Xia. In reality, Long Feiyi was even more impatient than Tang Li. He wanted nothing more than to immediately cut Jun Xia into pieces and avenge Han Yunxi's humiliation. It was just that he hid it all in his heart and didn't show it. He said indifferently, "We'll set out tonight. No one is allowed to delay. We'll try to reach Qingchuan Water City in half a month." Although their plan was very thorough, Bai Yanqing was still an unpredictable factor that could affect their movements at any time. Therefore, not only was time tight, but their mission was also very important. Not only did they have to find the Seven Fiends' dagger, they also had to continue investigating the fire of 10,000 poisons. Against someone like Bai Yanqing, who was impossible to guard against, the only change was to quickly master all the medicinal catalysts for the perplexing butterfly illusion. That night, after Han Yunxi and the others bid farewell to Tang Li, they secretly left East Origin Hall. They didn't even alert Myriad Merchant Hall. Their whereabouts represented their safety. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Long Feiyi wouldn't allow it to be exposed. Although time was tight, Long Feiyi still arranged for a carriage. He couldn't bear for Han Yunxi to rush about too much. His and Han Yunxi's carriage moved forward, while Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin followed behind. Gu didn't like carriages, so he rode in front to lead the way. His speed was extremely fast. Fortunately, Uncle Gao and Su Donglin's driving skills weren't bad, so they were able to catch up. Fortunately, Long Feiyi's carriage was sturdy and stable enough. Otherwise, with their speed, it would have been impossible to avoid flipping over. Day after day, they headed south. The civil war in Northern Li grew more intense with each passing day. On the 15th day, Han Yunxi and the others really did arrive at Qingchuan Water City. Qingchuan Water City was located at the border between the South Central Commander-in-Chief's office and Tianan. It was under Tianan's jurisdiction, and was an ancient city with a long history. It was also a very famous water city within Tianan. The reason why it was called a water city was because there were hundreds of water systems in the city, crisscrossing each other. Every household had a river flowing through their door, and every household had a river flowing through their door. Boats were also a necessity for every household. Almost all of the transportation in the city relied on boats. Unlike other water cities, Qingchuan Water City had a very big characteristic. This water city was in the shape of the 8 trigrams, with a total of 8 city gates. The hundreds of water systems in the city were actually formed after the 8 main water systems flowed in, forming intricate and complicated branches. And the 8 city gates were built on top of the 8 main water systems. In the center of Qingchuan Water City was a not small lake called Yinqing Lake. The houses were distributed in a ring around this lake, one ring at a time. If one stood at the highest point, at night, every house would be lit, and they would see a very beautiful 8 trigram spectacle. At this moment, it was night. Han Yunxi and the others had already entered the city. They were sitting on a boat, heading to the inn where they were staying. It was strange to say that once they entered the city, the waterways were very lively. There were lights on both sides of the river, and there were many boats going back and forth. Many people were even singing ballads on the boats. But the closer they got to the center of the city, the fewer lights there were, and the more deserted the waterways were. Logically, the closer to the center of the city, the more lively it should be. This Qingchuan Water City was the opposite. Long Feiyi's spies found out that 2 months ago, there was a strange incident in Qingchuan Water City. Every few days, there would be a woman killed. So far, there were already 6. And the way the deceased died was the same. The abdomen was stabbed, and the murder weapon was a dagger. However, after the coroner's examination, he found that the cause of death was not the abdomen wound, but bleeding from the 7 orifices. As for the cause of bleeding from the 7 orifices, he still couldn't find out. Now, all the corpses were frozen in the memorial hall, and the inn where Han Yunxi and the others were staying was near the memorial hall. Why are there fewer and fewer people? Han Yunxi asked. Seeing that no one answered her, the old boatman said, Yinqing Lake has been strange since ancient times. Everyone doesn't dare to get too close. Many feng shui masters have said that the closer you are to Yinqing Lake, the worse the feng shui is. The city wasn't lively in the first place, and there were several murder cases by the lake a while ago, so it was even more deserted. The old boatman asked, Is this the first time you've come to Qingchuan Water City? It's not fun here. This old man advises you to hurry back if there's nothing important. Although Han Yunxi and the others were in disguise, their temperament couldn't be concealed. One look and you could tell that they were either rich or respectable. At first, the old boatman didn't dare to say much. It was only after hearing Han Yunxi's words that he dared to remind them. Before Han Yunxi and the others came, they naturally investigated those murder cases clearly. Han Yunxi opened her mouth to ask the boatman to know if what they heard was true. Sure enough, after a conversation, the situation was similar. The deceased were all women and died in the same way, which proved that the murderer was the same person. Now they only wanted to confirm one thing. Those 6 women were bleeding from the 7 orifices. Was it because of poisoning? As long as the corpses were still there, it wasn't difficult for Han Yunxi to figure out this matter. After arriving at the inn, Han Yunxi originally intended to go directly to the coffin home. But seeing that it was late at night, she was afraid that it would delay the dual cultivation, so she could only drop the idea. Gu wasn't at all well behaved. When he saw Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi enter the house, he quietly left the inn and went to the coffin home. After days of rushing about, even if it was by carriage, it was still very tiring. In addition, Han Yunxi didn't delay her cultivation in the poison storage space. After she and Long Feiyi finished their dual cultivation homework, she fell asleep exhausted. However, the next morning, they were awakened by the noise outside. When she and Long Feiyi finished packing and opened the door, they saw that Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang were already outside. What's going on? Long Feiyi asked. Your Highness, the coffin home is on fire. Su Donglin replied. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi panicked and rushed out. The two of them stood on the balcony on the 2nd floor of the inn and could see that the coffin home had turned into a sea of fire not far away. The coffin home was surrounded by waterways and it was easy to put out the fire. How did the fire burn so fiercely? When did this happen? Long Feiyi asked. Just now. It suddenly caught on fire and there was no time to save it. Su Donglin replied truthfully. Did they use oil? Han Yunxi asked seriously. Long Feiyi, let's go and take a look. No matter what the cause of the fire was, it was definitely man-made. It was very likely that they wanted to destroy the corpses they were investigating. Time was too tight, otherwise, they would have gone over last night. Where's Gu? Long Feiyi asked. With such a big commotion, Gu should have been awakened. I haven't seen him since early morning. Maybe he went over early. Su Donglin replied. Long Feiyi was least worried about Gu. He didn't ask much and immediately rushed to the coffin home with Han Yunxi. As soon as they got close to the place, Han Yunxi smelled a strong smell of oil. Someone must have used a large amount of oil for the fire to burn so fiercely. With such a big fire, even if the corpses were frozen, they would have been burned to ashes. Isn't this fire too coincidental? Han Yunxi said with annoyance. Long Feiyi was also very regretful, but last night's dual cultivation had to continue. He said lightly, "Let's go and see what the magistrate court can find out." Han Yunxi didn't leave. "Let's wait. If there are some skeletons left, maybe we can examine them. The poison that bled from the 7 orifices must be highly toxic and could easily enter the bones." Therefore, the skeletons were Han Yunxi's last hope. They sat down in a nearby tea house and waited quietly for the fire to be put out. Helplessly, the fire only died down a little when night fell. Su Donglin looked for Gu the whole day but couldn't find him. He hurried back and whispered, "Your Highness, Princess, Gu is missing." Chapter 996. The person they didn't have to worry about the most had actually met with an accident. Su Donglin couldn't find Gu after searching for an entire day, and Gu didn't come to look for Han Yunxi and the others either. "Was he at the inn last night?" Long Fei Yi asked. Su Donglin was in a difficult position. "Your Highness, this subordinate, isn't sure." Su Donglin was only responsible for the safety of His Highness and the princess's room, while the shadow guard lurking in the shadows protected Bailey Mingxiang. Gu really didn't have anyone to care about. However, Gu didn't need anyone to care about him either. Su Donglin remembered that a long time ago, His Highness had ordered people to watch Gu. That was just watching and guarding against Gu Qishao, not protecting him. Su Donglin knew Gu Qishao's secret as well. If Bai Yanqing was still in danger after encountering the perplexing butterfly illusion, then Gu was simply invincible. In this world, as long as he didn't want to, who could do anything to him? Long Fei Yi and Su Donglin both knew the truth about Gu, but Han Yunxi didn't know anything. In Han Yunxi's eyes, Gu's poison skills were exquisite and his martial arts were first-rate, but he wasn't a very powerful expert. At least, before Long Fei Yi's martial arts had improved greatly, Gu couldn't beat Long Fei Yi. Previously, he had sparred with Dreamy, who also knew poison, but he couldn't beat him. Han Yunxi was still anxious. Something must have happened when he went out last night. Hurry up and search the entire city. If something had happened at the memorial hall, it would have caused quite a commotion. Gu wasn't stupid. Even if he couldn't beat them, he would at least make a big commotion and attract them. Either something happened last night, or something happened to him today. Long Fei Yi tactfully suggested another possibility. He ordered, "Su Donglin, search carefully." There were no clues at all. They could only wait for Su Donglin to find it. Han Yunxi's heart was uneasy, she felt that they were at a disadvantage this time. She looked at the raging fire and silently prayed that this fire would leave her some remains, even if it was just a little bit. It was late at night, but the fire was still burning. Han Yunxi and the others could only return to the inn. After the dual cultivation, neither of them felt sleepy. They stood on the balcony and observed the situation of the fire while waiting for Gu's news. There was still no news of Gu. In the middle of the night, the fire had really subsided. There were only a few places where the broken wood of the house was still burning. A place like a morgue only had one function, and that was to store corpses. Generally speaking, there were 3 situations. The first was that the grave had not been properly prepared and the coffin could not be buried. This was considered a temporary resting place. The second was that the family was poor and had no money to bury the corpse. They could only temporarily place the corpse in the morgue and think of ways to raise money. The third was that before the murder case was solved, the corpse could not be buried and could only be placed in the morgue for protection. Therefore, even in the middle of the night, many family members gathered around the fire and refused to leave. Some came to cry, some came to pay their respects, and some came to wait for the magistrate to give an explanation. Long Fei Yi had already sent someone to the magistrate to find out the magistrate's attitude. The entire morgue was burned until nothing was left, and there was nothing that could be salvaged. The magistrate had actually given up on putting out the fire since this afternoon. Now, they had arranged for a few soldiers to be stationed here purely to prevent the people from fighting and causing a riot. At dawn tomorrow, the magistrate would send people to clean up the scene and find the remains from the ruins for a unified burial. This was the only consolation for the victims' families. Not long after, Su Donglin came to report, "Your Highness, everything is ready. After the bones are cleaned up tomorrow, we will have a quarter of an hour." Cleaning up the bones was a very low-level job, and the soldiers naturally would not do it themselves. The magistrate paid for the job and gave it to 6 Master Chai, an old man in the city who specialized in helping people collect corpses. 6 Master Chai was considered a contractor, and he could always hire some young people to help with this kind of work at a low price. This time was no exception. After Su Donglin found out, he bribed the magistrate and arranged 2 people for 6 Master Chai in the name of investigating the case. He asked 6 Master Chai to keep it a secret. Tomorrow, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi would only need to disguise themselves and join 6 Master Chai's team. They could openly look for the bones in the ruins. With Han Yunxi's ability, as long as she could get close to the ruins, she could activate the detoxification system to search. In addition, Su Donglin specially arranged a quarter of an hour in the name of investigating the case so that His Highness and the princess could clean up all the bones alone. Han Yunxi listened to Su Donglin's arrangement and admired him. Su Donglin had only been in the magistrate's office for a day and a night, but he had already understood the workings of the magistrate's office so well. "It's really a waste if you don't work in the magistrate's office in the future," Han Yunxi said. "Hee, princess, you don't know. Actually, Su Donglin suddenly stopped talking. "What about you?" Han Yunxi asked. "Actually, I'm very stupid. I've been with your highness for a long time, and I've learned a little." Su Donglin flattered. Besides Han Yunxi, no one else could make Long Fei Yi smile with flattery. Long Fei Yi stared silently at the sea of flames. Han Yunxi wasn't in the mood to chat with Su Donglin either. She asked, "Still no news of Gu?" "Not yet. Princess, don't worry too much. Heaven helps the worthy. Unless he ran into a poisons expert, there's no way anyone could do anything to him." Yesterday morning, this subordinate had people set up ambushes at the 8 city gates. "As long as Sir Gu hasn't left the city, we'll definitely find him." Su Donglin comforted her. "Send more people to keep searching." Han Yunxi could only place her hopes in this direction. She instructed, "Don't be too ostentatious, lest we expose our tracks." Su Donglin exhaled after he left. He'd almost spilled the beans just then. He wanted to say that Chu Shifeng had taught him how to deal with the authorities. Ever since he learned from Ning Qing that the enmity between Eastern and Western Qin had been instigated, Su Donglin had written a letter to Chu Shifeng. Unfortunately, the man hadn't replied. Su Donglin mused that Boss Chu still needs time to adjust. After confirming the location of the fire, Long Fei Yi said, "Go rest. We have to wake up early tomorrow." Han Yunxi wasn't sleepy at all. She said, "That bastard Gu, could he have snuck off to the Justice Department last night and run into the culprit?" She'd been mulling over all sorts of possibilities today. After much thought, she concluded that this was the most likely scenario. Long Fei Yi silently mused that it'd be great if he really did run into the culprit. He nodded perfunctorily at Han Yunxi. If Gu was here, Han Yunxi would never show concern for him. But since Gu wasn't here, Han Yunxi had no choice but to stop before going too far. Long Fei Yi was displeased on certain matters, and he'd get upset as soon as he said so. Han Yunxi would never forget how she, Long Fei Yi, and Gu had gone to the poison grounds to search for the earth of 10,000 poisons. The three of them had been trapped by the fire on a cliff. Long Fei Yi had supported her weight while she supported Gu's. When their lives had been hanging by a thread, Gu had scolded her seriously for the first time and demanded that she let go. She told him, "Since we've chosen to travel together, we'll never leave each other." After experiencing so much together, Gu was more than just their friend. He was like family and a comrade that they couldn't abandon. Some feelings had nothing to do with ambiguity, but they were still hard to explain. Han Yunxi changed the topic. Why did the culprit kill 6 girls in a row? What's his target? This case should be considered a serial murder case. She had seen a lot of cases before. The culprit either had a perverted mentality or some kind of fetish to use the same method to kill the same young girls. Or he had some kind of motive to kill as many people as he could to get something. A complicated look flashed past Long Fei Ye's eyes. He'd never thought that he would lie to Han Yunxi about other people's matters. However, even though he had the chance to tell her Gu's secret, he didn't do so in the end. Long Fei Yi had also been thinking about this case. It's been 5 days since the culprit last killed. If he wants to kill again, he'll definitely do it in the next 2 days. His words reminded Han Yunxi. She said, "Long Fei Yi, get someone to go to the lake and lure the snake out of its hole." The previous victims were all killed by the Yin-Yang Lake. This showed that the culprit had a preference for the location of the murders. If the culprit wanted to kill again, he would definitely do it in the same place. Long Fei Yi nodded. Han Yunxi immediately called for the shadow guard to arrange for the female mercenaries who were waiting outside the city to come over. Long Fei Yi was used to bringing the shadow guard with him when he went out, while Han Yunxi was used to bringing the poison guards and female mercenaries. In fact, Han Yunxi's power was gradually increasing. Under her arrangements, the female mercenaries in the City of Daughters had already started to learn the art of poison. She was thinking that when the female mercenaries were able to take charge, she would hand over all the poison guards under her to Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi's shadow guard was not proficient in the art of poison, so the poison guards could fill in the gap. Who knew if this plan of luring the snake out of its hole would lead to the culprit? Who knew if Han Yunxi would discover the whereabouts of the metal of 10,000 poisons from the skeletons at the scene of the fire? Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi chatted until they fell asleep. They woke up early the next morning and dressed themselves in ragged clothes. Their hands were dirty, but it couldn't hide the noble air they were born with. After all, they were the descendants of Cloud Realm Continent's noblest bloodlines, the East and West Qin imperial clans. Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang both felt that something was off. In the end, Su Donglin helped Long Fei Yi put on a fake beard, while Bailey Mingxiang helped Han Yunxi disguise herself as a man and add a ring of stubble. Only then did the two of them manage to look a little destitute. By the time they reached the scene of the fire, 6 Master Chai's group had just arrived. 6 Master Chai glanced at Su Donglin without a word before tossing a pair of gloves and a basket to Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi didn't know any poisons, so he stayed by Han Yunxi's side. Han Yunxi began to search the area as soon as she entered the ruins. Although it looked like she was looking for skeletons, she was actually using her detox system to scan the area. Poisons that entered the bones were all extremely potent. Even if the 6 corpses didn't contain the metal of 10,000 poisons, the detox system would be able to tell as long as there were remains. If the dagger used to kill the victims was the metal of 10,000 poisons, then the poison would be even more potent. As long as there were remains, the detox system would be able to tell. Although the detox system couldn't detect the specific toxins in the water and earth of 10,000 poisons, it could still recognize the presence of the toxins. The same principle applied to the metal of 10,000 poisons. Han Yunxi searched the area carefully. She found 2 pieces of poisonous skeletons, but she gave up on them both times. This was because the detox system determined that there was poison in the bones as soon as it detected it. It was a very common poison that wouldn't cause blood to flow out of the 7 orifices. There were so many corpses in the memorial hall, so it wouldn't be strange if 1 or 2 of them were poisoned. What was strange was that Han Yunxi didn't find the poison she wanted even after all the skeletons were collected. What was going on? Just as Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi were analyzing the situation, the shadow guard hurriedly reported, "Your Highness, Princess, something big has happened by the lake." Chapter 997. Something big happened by the lake. What's the matter? Long Feiyi asked. The 2 shadow guards were killed. Sui Yun is missing. The murderer's martial arts and swordsmanship are very strong. I heard a cry for help, but when I rushed over, I only saw a figure. It should be a woman, the shadow guard answered truthfully. Sui Yun was the female mercenary who carried out this mission. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi looked at each other, then rushed to Yinyang Lake without saying anything. They didn't find anything at the memorial hall, but there was a result at Yinyang Lake. The murderer should be the murderer of the 6 women's case. When Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi rushed over, Su Donglin had already arrived and was examining the bodies of the 2 shadow guards. Your Highness, Princess, the 2 shadow guards were killed by a sword. Their throats were slit. Su Donglin reported. Long Feiyi squatted down and examined the bodies carefully. The swordsmanship is really good. Han Yunxi was shocked. She knew that if Long Feiyi approved of it, it must be a very good swordsmanship. It must be better than all the shadow guards. Is Sui Yun alive or dead? Han Yunxi asked seriously. The shadow guard shook his head. When I heard the news and rushed over, I only saw the murderer's back. In other words, the shadow guard couldn't be sure if Sui Yun was killed and her body taken away, or if she was kidnapped. It seems that the murderer only uses a dagger to kill women, Long Feiyi said calmly. The murderer had killed the 6 women with a dagger, and they all died from bleeding from the 7 orifices of their heads. Today, the murderer killed the 2 shadow guards with a sword. Although the sword was not poisonous, judging from the wounds, the murderer's sword must be a good one. The murderer fled to the right. I've already sent someone to track him down, the shadow guard replied truthfully. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi did not expect that the murderer's martial arts would be so good. This time, they had alerted the enemy. They were afraid that the plan of luring the snake out of its hole could not be used again. They couldn't find any clues at the memorial hall, and if the shadow guardians didn't manage to find any clues, they would lose all their clues. Long Feiyi checked the shadow guard's body again before standing up. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he just said, Su Donglin, arrange for a grand funeral. Han Yunxi looked back at the Yinyang Lake. The surface of the lake was as calm as a mirror, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. It was clean and pure. The scenery was so mesmerizing that Han Yunxi couldn't help but walk towards the lakeside. Long Feiyi quickly followed and whispered, "This lake is strange. Don't get too close." As soon as he finished speaking, Han Yunxi stopped abruptly and exclaimed, "It's poisoned." Just now, she might have been far away, but now, she was less than a step away from the lake. The detoxification system immediately warned her that there was poison in the water. It was not that the water was poisonous, but that someone in the lake had been poisoned. The detoxification system was very sensitive to human poisons. The detoxification system did not analyze the poison, but only determined that someone had been poisoned. Han Yunxi activated a deeper examination, but the results were the same. The analysis could not be done in detail. Long Fei Yi, there's someone in the lake who has been poisoned. Han Yunxi hesitated and added, based on my experience, it should be a corpse. A corpse? Could it be Sui Yun's corpse? Long Fei Yi immediately ordered the shadow guard to go into the water to salvage the corpse. It's in the middle of the lake. It should be quite deep, Han Yunxi reminded. Who knew that the moment the shadow guard went into the water, Han Yunxi's detoxification system could not detect the presence of the poison. She said, "Quick, the corpse is sinking." Soon, the shadow guard surfaced. "Your Highness, Princess, there's a whirlpool in the water that's sucking the corpse in." "It's Sui Yun's corpse, that's right. This subordinate can't go down. Go and call Bailey Mingxiang over." Long Fei Yi immediately ordered. Not long after, Bailey Mingxiang rushed over. After she asked about the situation, she went into the water without saying a word. However, not long after, she surfaced as well. "Mingxiang, what's the situation?" Han Yunxi asked anxiously. "Princess, can you let bodyguard Su go into the water with this servant?" "That corpse, this servant doesn't dare to touch that corpse." Bailey Mingxiang's voice was trembling. "I'll go down with you." Han Yunxi answered without hesitation. She could see that Bailey Mingxiang was very frightened. When Han Yunxi went down, Long Fei Yi naturally had to accompany her. The two of them went into the water together and were protected by Bailey Mingxiang in the light circle. When Han Yunxi approached, Bailey Mingxiang grabbed her hand and held it tightly. Although she begged to let Su Donglin go into the water, she didn't know if she could hold on without someone holding her hand. Bailey Mingxiang led Han Yunxi and the others into the whirlpool. The whirlpool's rotation was very small at first, but it became bigger as they went down. Han Yunxi held Bailey Mingxiang's hand. She calmed down a little and said seriously, "There must be some kind of power hidden under the water to form this kind of whirlpool. The bottom of the water is very deep. It won't be easy to go down." Soon, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi saw Sui Yun's body. It was protected by Bailey Mingxiang in the light circle and did not continue to sink. But when Han Yunxi saw the body, she couldn't help but gasp. Long Fei Yi didn't have much of a reaction. He only ordered coldly, "Let's go over." Only then did Bailey Mingxiang dare to approach. The two light circles touched each other and merged into one. Sui Yun's body fell beside Long Fei Yi's feet. Even though Han Yunxi helped Bailey Mingxiang up, her hands were still trembling. She didn't dare to look and immediately led everyone to the surface of the water. After coming out of the water, Sui Yun's body was placed by the lake. When Su Donglin and the shadow guards saw it, they were all shocked. Even Su Donglin didn't dare to approach. Only Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi surrounded the body and examined it. For people who studied medicine, corpses were as normal as eating a meal. Han Yunxi wasn't afraid, but she couldn't believe it. This was because the body was soft like a human skin bag. All the bones were gone. What was the reason for killing someone like this? In addition to being surprised, Han Yunxi was filled with anger. She stared at the body and didn't move for a long time. "Is it poisonous?" Long Fei Yi asked. At this moment, Han Yunxi regained her senses. She took a deep breath and recovered her composure. Then, she began to examine the body seriously. Han Yunxi checked the wound, and the detoxification system began to check again. The detoxification system's result was the same as the previous one. It only knew that Sui Yun was poisoned. As for what kind of poison it was, it couldn't detect it at all. Han Yunxi found a dagger wound on the abdomen of the body. With these 2 points, Han Yunxi more or less knew what was going on. She then checked the 7 orifices of the body, including the eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Although the body had been soaked in water and the blood had been blurred, Han Yunxi still detected traces of poisonous blood in the 7 orifices of the body. Therefore, like the 6 women before her, Cui Yu was bleeding from the 7 orifices of the body. Han Yunxi told Long Feiyi the result of the examination. It seems that the murder weapon is most likely the Qi Sha dagger. Han Yunxi was very strict about poisons. The reason why she said that the murder weapon was the Qi Sha dagger and not the gold of 10,000 poisons was because the poison on the dagger could be another kind of poison that could be fatal. It was just that the detoxification system didn't record it and couldn't detect it. There was only one way to determine whether the Qi Sha dagger was the gold of 10,000 poisons or not. That was to obtain the dagger and drip it into the perplexing butterfly illusion. This was the safest and most foolproof method. Of course, at this moment, Han Yunxi didn't care so much. There were only 2 things in her mind. The first was to find Gu, and the second was to take revenge. Revenge for Sui Yun, the shadow guard, and the 6 innocent girls. Long Feiyi looked at the body and whispered, "There's only a wound on the abdomen. How did all the bones get pulled out? And the time was so short." Yes, the time was very short. Just now, the shadow guard said that he rushed over after hearing that the 2 shadow guards were trying to save her. That meant that Sui Yun was killed first. After killing Sui Yun, the murderer had to remove Sui Yun's bones while dealing with the 2 shadow guards. Wasn't this a little too difficult? Han Yunxi was silent for a moment, then said with certainty, "Long Feiyi, the murderer must be a bone collector." It must be. Only a bone collector had the ability to empty the bones of a corpse without destroying it. I know why I couldn't detect the poison in the bones of the coffin home. Han Yunxi said again, before the murderer set the fire, she must have removed the bones of the 6 female corpses. She set the coffin home on fire to destroy the evidence. Today, she threw Sui Yun's body into the lake to destroy the evidence. She wants to cover up the matter of collecting the bones. What does she want to do with these bones? Long Feiyi asked suspiciously. Su Donglin, go and investigate immediately. Secretly investigate all the corpse collectors and bone collectors in Qingchuan Water City, including all the shops that sell bone ornaments. I want to visit them one by one. Han Yunxi said coldly. Corpse collectors were people who specialized in collecting corpses. It was very common. However, a bone collector was a shady profession. The so-called bone collector was collecting human bones. Collecting human bones was divided into 2 categories, collecting the bones of living people and collecting the bones of dead people. In many evil cults, there would be worship of living people's bones. The bones of living people would be removed piece by piece, and the bones would be used to carve statues for worship. Collecting the bones of dead people was either stealing unburied corpses or digging up corpses that had already been buried. After a bone collector got the bones, there were many ways to sell them. It was better to sell them to wizards for magic, sell them to medical schools for research, sell them to collectors with special hobbies, bone carvers. From what Han Yunxi understood, many bone collectors would secretly collude with corpse collectors to make it easier for them to find corpses and learn about their condition. They'd also collude with bone carvings and jewelry shop owners to sell the bones to them. The murderer's bone collector ability was so brilliant that he didn't hesitate to set fire to the corpses. He must be an expert in this circle. As long as they asked around, they would be able to catch a few suspects. Su Donglin immediately took people to inquire about the news. Although Long Feiyi had heard of bone collectors, he didn't know as much as Han Yunxi. He was very puzzled. How knowledgeable was this woman? The murderer only wants the bones of women. Why must he use the dagger Chi Sha to kill people? Why is that? Han Yunshi asked puzzledly. The murderer's martial arts were so good that he could kill people with a casual sword. Why would he use the dagger Chi Sha? Did he have other purposes or to create panic and confuse the investigators? Chapter 998. In the face of Han Yunshi's doubts, Long Feiyi gave a rather certain answer. He said, this matter must be related to the Seven Demons' dagger. Otherwise, with the murderer's ability to collect bones, he didn't need to find a living person. He could have just found a few corpses in the memorial hall. The Seven Demons' dagger was not an auspicious or inauspicious item. Was there any secret hidden in the Seven Demons' dagger? Han Yunshi nodded. Now they could only wait for Su Donglin to return with the list so that they could search for the murderer. Although there weren't many clues, it wasn't difficult for Han Yunshi to find the murderer after determining the scope. This was because the detoxification system had already remembered the poison in Sui Yun's body. In other words, the detoxification system had already recorded the poison in the Seven Demons' dagger. If Han Yunshi encountered it again, the detoxification system would send out a reminder as long as it was within a certain distance. The Seven Demons' dagger was such an important and small item. The murderer would naturally carry it with him. It had to be said that the murderer hid it very well. If Han Yunshi's detoxification system didn't have such a powerful detection function, Han Yunshi wouldn't have been able to find the poison in the lake and the corpse would never have been found. Generally speaking, a corpse would float to the surface a few days after sinking into the water, and then sink forever. However, there was a whirlpool in the lake. Sui Yun's corpse couldn't float to the surface at all. Therefore, no one would ever find the corpse. The corpse would disappear forever, just like the corpse in the memorial hall, leaving no clues for the investigators. Han Yunshi and Long Feiyi were discussing this issue when they suddenly stopped and looked at each other. Long Feiyi, could it be that the murderer knew that there was a whirlpool in the lake? Han Yunshi asked. It must be so. Otherwise, with her ability, she could have taken the corpse away and destroyed the evidence. There was no need to rush to get rid of it. Long Feiyi said. The murderer must have known that there was a whirlpool in the lake that could destroy the corpse forever, so she threw the corpse away and disposed of it. The Yinyang Lake had always been a taboo in Qingchuan Water City. The people in Qingchuan City didn't like to get too close to the lake, let alone swim in it. How did the murderer know that there was a whirlpool in the lake? What was the power in the depths of the whirlpool? Bailey Mingxiang, go to the bottom of the lake and have a look. Long Feiyi ordered. Yes. Bailey Mingxiang didn't dare to look at Long Feiyi. She lowered her head and said, Your Highness, the bottom of the lake is very deep. With this servant's ability, it will take at least 2 or 3 days to reach the bottom. Long Feiyi nodded and ordered a shadow guard to accompany Bailey Mingxiang into the water. Be careful. Report to me immediately if anything happens. Han Yunshi looked at Bailey Mingxiang and said seriously, Be careful. With His Highness and Princess's words, the frightened Bailey Mingxiang became much braver. Just like in the illusory realm of the wordless monument, she earnestly reported, Your Highness, Princess, don't worry. This servant will definitely not disappoint you. Su Donglin, on the other hand, spent an entire night investigating the bone collectors. Long Feiyi and Han Yunshi didn't leave Yinyang Lake. Since they had already alerted the enemy, they didn't mind staying here. This mystery seemed to have cleared up a little, but at the same time, there were more doubts. I wonder how Gu is doing. Han Yunshi sighed softly. Fortunately, the murderer only wanted women's bones. Otherwise, she really couldn't imagine Gu's situation. Judging from the murderer's martial arts, it must be above Gu's. He has a tough life. He won't die. Don't worry. Long Fei Yi said lightly. He didn't know when it started, but whenever Han Yunxi mentioned Gu, he didn't feel as disgusted as before. Had he changed his opinion of Gu Qishao? Or did he understand Han Yunxi's feelings better? Time always passed quickly while waiting. When it was time for dual cultivation, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi didn't waste any time. Long Fei Yi cautiously had the shadow guard stand guard around them, not allowing anyone to approach. The matter of dual cultivation was related to their martial arts cultivation, and more importantly, it was related to their lives. They couldn't stop for a single day in 3 months, or else they could enter cultivation deviation. Long Fei Ye's consequences would be even more severe than Han Yunxi's. By the time they finished cultivating, it was already late at night. Long Fei Yi sat by the lake while Han Yunxi lay on the grass, her head resting on his lap. The two of them stared at the lake, their hearts calm for once. They had been too busy recently. They had been busy in the Bailey Army, in the three-way black market, and in the 100 Poison sect. Then they had rushed from 100 Poison sect to the Poison sect to the three-way black market, then back to Water City from the three-way black market. The two of them were so busy that their feet touched the ground. They had forgotten how long it had been since they had sat down so peacefully, doing nothing, thinking nothing, just keeping each other company. Long Fei Yi gently played with Han Yunxi's hair and asked gently, "Tired?" Han Yunxi looked up and saw the moonlight illuminating Long Fei Yi's face. It made him look especially gentle, like the moon and water. "With you here, I'm not tired," she replied. "Scared?" Long Fei Yi asked again. "With you here, I'm not scared," Han Yunxi replied with a smile. As long as he was by her side, she wasn't afraid of anything. She wasn't tired. Perhaps this was called a sense of security. Long Fei gently caressed her cheek before taking her hand and placing it by his lips. "Then be good and sleep. I'll call you when Su Donglin comes." Han Yunxi wasn't sleepy at all, but hearing Long Fei Ye's gentle words made her want to sleep. She rubbed against his thigh for a long time before finding the most comfortable position to use as a pillow and curl up by his side. Even if she wasn't sleepy, she could still calm her heart and cultivate sleep, enjoying this moment of peace and quiet. Perhaps it was too comfortable, or perhaps it was too safe, but Han Yunxi soon began to feel drowsy. In her days, she only felt like they had returned to the bamboo hut in Jiangnan's plum blossom sea. He was sitting like this with her pillow on his thigh, quietly watching the falling snow. Unknowingly, she fell asleep. She couldn't go back this year, but she hoped she could next year. She had to go back. In her days, Han Yunxi began to talk in her sleep. "Fei, I'm here," Long Fei Yi intoned. I like you so much." Han Yunxi really was talking in her sleep. She was dreaming that she had returned to Jiangnan's plum blossom sea. Back then, she had already liked him very, very much. Long Fei Yi looked at her sleepy face and didn't answer, but his lips curved into a smile. He discovered that sometimes, watching her sleep was more satisfying than tormenting her. "I knew it long ago," he murmured. After daybreak, Su Donglin sent over a detailed list of names of all the corpse collectors, bone collectors, and bone ornament shops in the city. One night wasn't long, so Su Donglin naturally had his ways and means to take care of everything. Otherwise, he wouldn't be worthy of being Long Fei Ye's #1 retainer. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi returned to the inn to tidy up and disguise themselves as a pair of husband and wife traveling the Jianghu. Long Fei Yi changed out of his usual black robes for a white brocade robe. He held a folding fan and looked like a noble young master. Han Yunxi wore a long pink dress and looked rather playful. When the two of them walked together, they didn't look like an old man and his wife who had been married for many years, but like newlyweds. In Su Donglin's eyes, the two of them looked at least 4 years younger. They weren't old to begin with, so their usual clothes were too low-key and steady, making them look more mature. Han Yunxi crossed off all the corpse collectors' names. She was only looking for them to find the bone collectors who were in cahoots with them. Since Su Donglin had helped her with this task, she could save herself some effort. It wasn't easy to find a corpse collector, but it was even harder to find a reason to interact with them. Therefore, Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi started their search from the bone jewelry store. They visited quite a few shops. The proprietress then told Han Yunxi, engraved in the bones and engraved in the heart means taking a piece of bone from your body and polishing it into an ornament for your loved one. Madam, do you still dare to give it to him? How could she as a child as well? She just wanted to see if the lady boss knew how to collect bones herself or if there were other bone collectors hidden in the shop. The lady boss glanced at Long Feiyi's hand and couldn't help but say, "Sir's hand is really beautiful." Long Feiyi's hand was indeed beautiful. His hand was big, his fingers were long, and his knuckles were distinct. How many women in the world yearned to hold these hands? However, he only held Han Yunxi's hand. Long Feiyi didn't say anything. He was casually observing the shop assistant who was organizing things at the side. "Sir's finger can make an extremely beautiful pinky ring for madam." The lady boss smiled and asked, "I wonder if Sir is willing to part with it. How long will it take?" Long Feiyi was even more direct than Han Yunxi. "If Sir agrees, it will take 2 hours," the lady boss replied. 2 hours to collect the bone and polish it. This speed was really unexpected. Han Yunxi quickly asked, "Then what about me? What kind of bone do I need to collect to make a pinky ring? How long will it take?" The lady boss suddenly grabbed Han Yunxi's wrist and pinched it, saying, "Hand bone, it will also take 2 hours. Then let's start now." Han Yunxi asked again. 1,000 taels for the pinky ring and 500 taels for the pinky ring. The lady boss said. Han Yunxi was very incredulous. In the eyes of the lady boss, it seemed very normal to take a bone from one's body to make an accessory for one's beloved. Paying any price was not excessive. The lady boss actually didn't mention to them the consequences of taking out the bone and becoming disabled. "If I take out the bone, then wouldn't my hand be crippled?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. The lady boss's face suddenly darkened and she arrogantly said, "If you don't dare, then leave early. My little shop never forces customers. If you don't want to do it, it's meaningless to order this gift." Long Feiyi didn't say anything and put down the silver. Seeing this, the lady boss's expression finally improved. She lazily stood up and walked out of the counter. "The two of you, come with me." Long Feiyi tightly held Han Yunxi's hand and followed the lady boss to the backyard. When they reached the backyard, they saw 2 or 3 women carving bone accessories, while a man was forging a dagger. His right sleeve hung empty, obviously without an arm. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi both noticed this one-armed man. Although he only had his left hand, it was very nimble and powerful. They saw him take out the dagger that had already been formed from the fire and step on the end. His left hand was hammered and he used all his strength to hammer it. "That's the boss, right?" Han Yunxi probed. She suspected that this man's arm had been chopped off by the lady boss to make an accessory. She didn't know if the lady boss heard her, but she didn't answer. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi immediately rushed over. Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin had been waiting by the lake for a long time. Your Highness, Princess, there is indeed a force under the whirlpool at the bottom of the lake. This servant can't resist it and can't get too close. However, I can be sure that it's sword chi. Sword chi. Could it be that there was an ancient sword hidden at the bottom of the lake? If an ordinary sword was not controlled by the swordsman, it would not be able to burst out such a powerful sword chi. Only an ancient sword that had a powerful force could emit sword chi. If a swordsman wanted to control an ancient sword, he must first tame the sword chi of the sword. Otherwise, he would be devoured. The profound frost sword in Long Fei Yi's hand was an ancient sword. Long Fei Yi also spent a lot of effort to subdue it. Long Fei Yi was overjoyed and asked Han Yunxi, "Let's go down and take a look." Han Yunxi had already cultivated the power of nirvana. Now that she was dual cultivating with him, she had already mastered a complete set of swordsmanship. She had always lacked a sword. He had also been looking for one, but he couldn't find a satisfactory one. How powerful was it to be able to create a whirlpool at the bottom of the lake? Long Fei Yi suspected that the ancient sword at the bottom of the lake was even more powerful than the profound frost sword in his hand. How could he miss out on such a good thing? How could he not give it to Han Yunxi? Han Yunxi's first thought was the murderer. The murderer's swordsmanship was so brilliant, and he knew that there was a whirlpool at the bottom of the lake. He must know that there was a sword hidden at the bottom of the Yin-Yang lake. The murderer had a dagger to kill people and take the bones. Could it be related to the sword at the bottom of the lake? Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were quickly brought to the bottom of the lake by Bailey Mingxiang. They entered the center of the whirlpool and kept going down. The bottom of the lake was really deep. Han Yunxi felt that it was not like diving into a lake, but a bit like diving into a sea. After a while, they finally felt the existence of the sword chi. Your Highness, the princess's flowing light ball can only hold on until here. It will break if we go any further. Bailey Mingxiang was very cautious. Han Yunxi and Bailey Mingxiang could feel the strength and sharpness of the sword chi. It was as if there was a swordsman at the bottom of the lake, waving his sword at them. The sword chi was earth-shattering, rushing over in the water. However, Long Fei Yi suddenly felt the baleful aura in the sword chi. The old man Kenshin said that ancient swords were divided into good and evil. The righteous ones had a venerable aura, while the evil ones had a baleful aura. Long Fei Yi muttered to himself, such a strong baleful aura, could it be? Han Yunxi was stunned when she heard this. She seemed to have thought of something and suddenly exclaimed, Long Fei Yi, quick! Go find that one-armed man. He's very suspicious. Why? Long Fei Yi did not understand. Let's go first. I'll explain it to you. Han Yunxi urged. Bailey Mingxiang did not dare delay and hurriedly escorted them to the shore. Long Fei Yi took Han Yunxi and rushed to the True Love store. Long Fei Yi, Mo Xia jumped into the furnace and the sword was forged. It was because human bones can be used to forge swords. The phosphorus and calcium in human bones can absorb the impurities in the molten iron and the iron will become purer. Han Yunxi explained. Long Fei Yi did not understand the words phosphorus and calcium that Han Yunxi said, but he roughly understood what Han Yunxi meant. He immediately thought of the one-armed man in the True Love store. They did not understand why the one-armed man would forge a dagger in the bone jewelry store. Now it seemed that the man must have added human bones to the dagger. The murderer was a bone collector and knew that there was a mystery at the bottom of the lake. Then the murderer most likely wanted to use human bones to forge a sword to subdue Mo's sword soul. As for the connection between the sword, the Qi Sha dagger, and the 7 female skeletons, Han Yunxi had no idea. Her guess was just a guess. She could not be sure that the one-armed man and the lady boss were the murderers. However, they would rather admit their mistake than miss the chance. Whether the two were the murderers or not, as long as Long Feiyi went to test them, it would be clear. When Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi arrived at the True Love store, they found that the store was empty. The backyard was also empty. There was no one. Was it because of their test today that they aroused the other party's vigilance? If so, then the lady boss and the one-armed man were even more suspicious. Long Feiyi ordered the shadow guard to track down all the people who were related to this store. He immediately took Han Yunxi back to the Yin-Yang Lake. They did not guard the lake like last night. Instead, they found a place to hide. As long as Mo's sword soul was still there, then the murderer would definitely come to the lake. They could not escape. After Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi dual cultivated, they continued to guard the lake. That night, the murderer did not appear. The next morning, Su Donglin sent a message. Your Highness, this subordinate has investigated clearly. The people in that store never interacted with outsiders. The human bones used in the store were all found by the owner. They have never traded with any bone collectors in the city. What's their background? Long Feiyi asked. This subordinate could not find out. I only found out that the store is 10 years old. The lady boss is a foreigner. She bought the store 10 years ago and started operating it. No one has seen the boss. Su Donglin answered truthfully. Long Feiyi did not ask any more questions. He only said, stop all investigations. Do not alert the enemy. They waited for 3 days. During these 3 days, True Love did not open for business again. No one came back. If they were only suspicious before, then now Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi were very sure that the lady boss and the one-armed man were definitely related to this murder. They continued to wait. Unfortunately, after waiting for another 3 days, there was still no news. There were no more murders in the city. The magistrate court had been investigating the fire at the memorial hall, but there was no clear explanation. The magistrate court had no way to investigate because they did not know that the deceased's bones had been collected. Long Feiyi, we can't wait any longer. Gu is in danger. Han Yunxi said seriously. In these 6 days, the murderer did not make any moves. There was no progress. Long Feiyi was silent for a moment. He only said one word, okay. He immediately pulled out his sword and with a few somersaults, he flew to the sky above Yin-Yang Lake. He waved his sword and the wind surged. A wall of water rose from the calm lake like a water curtain. It was hung high and constantly rushed up. Everyone who was hiding in the surroundings was shocked. No one thought that His Highness martial arts had reached such a high level. Just one sword could cause the wind to surge and clouds to surge. Even Han Yunxi was shocked. She had dual cultivated with him every night, but she could not understand his true martial arts. His martial arts had improved so much. What about her? Aside from dual cultivation, Han Yunxi had never fought for real, so she wasn't very clear about her own strength. At this time, she did not have time to think about these things. She immediately ordered Su Donglin to arrange for all the guards to be on guard. Long Feiyi's move was cutting off all means of retreat. His action was to tell the murderer that they already knew the secret at the bottom of the lake and had the intention to fight for it. If the murderer also had his eyes on Yin-Yang Lake, he would definitely appear. Long Fei stirred up the calm Yinyang Lake into a stormy sea. The waves rose and fell one after another. The water curtain fell on one side and rose on the other. The entire Yinyang Lake seemed to be experiencing an earthquake. It made people feel that the lake water would pour out at any time and drown the surroundings. This scene was soul-stirring. This was a magnificent scene. This scene was extremely beautiful. Just when everyone was unwilling to look away, Long Fei suddenly held his sword with both hands. The sword pierced the sky and in an instant, a powerful sword chi burst out. The Shadow Guard and Bailey Mingxiang were unfamiliar with this power. However, Han Yunxi knew that this was the power of the Lust Bite. After leaving Heaven Mountain, Long Fei had not used the power of the Lust Bite again. The entire lake seemed to be pulled by this power. Countless water droplets jumped up from the water surface. They were densely packed and covered the entire lake. Gradually, these water droplets became bigger and turned into water pillars. They soared into the sky and gathered towards Long Fei. Han Yunxi unconsciously clenched her fists. Although she knew that Long Fei could control this power, she could not help but worry. Sure enough, all the water pillars gathered on Long Fei's sword. Long Fei was high and mighty. He was handsome like a god. Only when she saw Long Fei clearly did Han Yunxi's nervous heart relax. At this moment, she could not help but revere that man. Long Fei's eyes turned cold. In an instant, the profound frost sword slashed towards the center of the lake with all the water pillars. But right at this moment, something unexpected happened. A water dragon suddenly rushed out from the center of the stormy lake. It was majestic and menacing. In an instant, it collided with Long Fei's water dragon. At the moment of collision, all the water froze in the air for a moment. Then, it scattered and scattered. The surface of the Yin-Yang Lake was like a rainstorm. As the waves fell, they left behind two streams of energy. One was Long Fei's sword chi, while the other was Moi's sword chi, angered by the provocation. The two powers fought. Soon, Long Fei lost the upper hand and was about to be devoured. Mo Xia was an ancient treasure sword. Its sword chi was very frightening. In addition, it had a murderous aura. Even if Long Fei had the power to subdue it, before he could break the murderous aura, he would not be able to subdue it. Instead, he would be devoured by its murderous aura and go mad. The reason why Long Fei provoked Mo Xia's sword spirit was not to subdue it. He just wanted to lure out the murderer. Seeing this, Han Yunxi immediately wanted to help. Who knew that just as Han Yunxi stood up, a red shadow suddenly flew over and flew between the two sword chi. What was going on? Everyone was very surprised. If the murderer had appeared, the murderer would not be so stupid as to court death. It was impossible to estimate how powerful the two sword chis were. If it was not courting death, what was it? That person seems to have been thrown over. Su Donglin muttered. It seems to be Gu. Bailey Mingxiang was shocked. Gu! Han Yunxi shouted and flew out. However, when Gu approached the sword chi again, a few thorny vines suddenly sprang out from the lake and pulled him back. At this time, everyone could see clearly. They saw that Gu was tied up. His body was covered with human bones. There were even 7 human bones hanging on his waist. What was going on? Long Fei frowned and looked over while resisting Mo Xia's sword chi. He did not care about what happened to Gu. Once it was burned by the sword fire, even water could not extinguish it. Only a stronger sword chi could extinguish the sword fire. Needless to say, the murderer's swordsmanship had exceeded Long Fei Ye's expectations time and time again. How could such an expert not be from Kenzo? Just as Long Fei Ye was about to extinguish the sword fire, Gu suddenly used the power of the vines to face the sword fire head-on. At this moment, Long Fei Ye almost scolded Gu for courting death. But he quickly realized that something was wrong. Gu seemed to be waiting for this moment. This guy had been missing for so many days. What did he do? What was he trying to do now? Long Fei Yi did not block the sword fire. Once the sword fire touched Gu, it immediately ignited all the bones in his body. What was unbelievable was that the burning flames were all black. As the flames burned, everyone felt a sinister aura. At this moment, the culprit suddenly cut through the brambles by the lake. Gu Qishao was surrounded by a ball of fire as he fell into the water. Once he fell into the water, Mo Xie's sword qi that permeated the water gathered around him. With the help of the sword qi, the black sword fire burned even more vigorously. Everyone could clearly feel the sword qi surging up from the center of the lake. Han Yinshi did not expect the situation to develop like this. She saw Gu taking the initiative to fly into the sword fire. But she did not have time to think about the reason. At this moment, there was only one thought in her mind. Gu will die. Suddenly, she exclaimed, Gu. Gu will die. Long Fei Yi, quickly save him. Long Fei Yi could really save people. He also knew how to save people. Although the one-armed man's swordsmanship was superb, it was still below his. Otherwise, his sword chi would not have been deflected, but directly shattered. His sword chi was still strong against the one-armed man. So, his sword chi could extinguish the sword fire that the one-armed man refined. But, if he extinguished the sword fire now, Mo Xie's sword spirit would probably sink to the bottom of the lake forever. He did not know why Gu did this. But one thing was for sure. Gu was definitely aiming for Mo Xie's sword spirit. Long Fei Yi was hesitating whether to save. Han Yunqi suddenly stopped shouting. She looked to the left and shouted, Long Fei Yi, be careful of poison. Long Fei Yi immediately leaped into the air. A dagger flew past his feet. This dagger was none other than the Seven Demons' dagger. After Long Fei Yi dodged, he immediately tried to snatch the Seven Demons' dagger. However, the one-armed man was very close to the Seven Demons' dagger. He did not try to snatch it. Instead, he swung his sword and swept the Seven Demons' dagger towards Gu. Everything happened very suddenly. No one had time to think, let alone defend. Just like that, everyone watched as the Seven Demons' dagger sank into the fireball. Chapter 1002. The one-armed man had no other choice. Just as he was about to raise his sword to extinguish the sword fire, a huge fireball suddenly flew out from the blazing flames and soared high into the sky. What was that? Everyone was very surprised and their attention followed. But unexpectedly, after the fireball soared into the sky, the huge lake's surface suddenly flashed with sword light and in an instant, the entire forest was illuminated. Long Fei Yi hurriedly turned sideways and used his body to block the sword light for Han Yunqi and retreated far away. The one-armed man followed closely behind and protected the lady boss. Su Donglin and Bailey Mingxiang were a step slower and were all injured by the sword qi. Wounds appeared on their bodies caused by the sword light. The powerful sword light did not stay on the lake's surface for long as it rapidly converged towards the center of the lake. Following the convergence of the sword light, the blazing flames on the lake's surface also converged towards the center of the lake. The sword gleam and the flames, one white and one black, rose and fell in waves, winding and surging like waves, beautiful, magnificent, 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 and magnificent. Everyone was attracted by the beautiful scenery and forgot about the sword wounds on their bodies. Han Yunxi raised her head and looked at the fireball and muttered, "Long Fei Yi, is that Shao Qi? Is Shao Qi still alive?" The moment she finished speaking, all the flames suddenly surged past the sword light and rushed towards the huge fireball in the sky. The flames merged into the fireball and immediately ignited the huge fireball. The huge fireball suddenly swelled up like the sun and illuminated the entire world. Everyone was shocked by this scene. After the huge fireball swelled up, the sword light waves in the lake suddenly surged like stormy waves. With lightning speed, they converged at the center of the lake and soared into the sky, directly attacking the huge fireball. The speed of this force caught everyone off guard, the strength of this force made everyone unable to stop it. The wonder of this force made everyone feel reverence. When the sword light collided with the huge fireball, an unexpected scene happened again. The blazing flames of the huge fireball suddenly extinguished. The fire was extinguished, but no one could see Gu. They could only see a big ball of vines. The vines were very dense, covering everything inside the ball tightly. It was impossible to see whether the person inside was alive or dead. What was most inconceivable was that the vines were actually lush and green, and there were no signs of them being burned. The Qi Sha dagger stabbed into the thorny vines, but he didn't know if the dagger had stabbed the person inside. How could this be? How? The one-armed man was shocked. He had clearly cut off the vines. Shouldn't the vines protecting Gu have withered? Long Fei Yi smiled bitterly, helpless and powerless, he could only smile bitterly. And at this moment, under the nourishment of the sword aura, the thorny vines and leaves bloomed with demonic red thorny flowers. Looking from afar, it was like fire, like blood, so beautiful. Everyone was stunned. Gradually, a fiery red light flowed out from the bottom of the lake. Different from the sword aura's sharpness, this red light was very gentle, and flowed gracefully up the sword aura. It's the sword spirit, Mo's sword spirit has come out. Long Fei Yi murmured to himself. When the red light touched the thorny vines, the dense thorny vines suddenly loosened, and fell down in circles, thorny flower petals fluttering in the air. Everyone finally saw Gu Qi Shao. He wasn't burned by the sword fire, and the dagger Qi Sha didn't stab him. He was perfectly fine, and looked unharmed. However, the bones that were originally hanging on his body had all disappeared, and the warm red light was slowly flowing into his body. When the thorny vines all fell, the dagger Qi Sha also fell. Suddenly, the one-armed man hugged the lady boss with one hand, and flew over with the sword in the other. Long Fei Ye's lips curled into a cold arc, and protected Han Yunxi in the air. The man seemed to be in pain, but he gritted his teeth and waved his sword again, wanting to use the dagger Qi Sha to kill Gu. Long Fei Ye's ruthless sword aura intercepted the dagger Qi Sha. The man immediately waved his sword again, and the dagger Qi Sha was in a deadlock between the two sword auras, hanging in the air. Long Fei Yi was about to use his strength, but who knew, the dagger Qi Sha suddenly disappeared into thin air. Everyone was shocked, and the one-armed man was very confused. He looked at Gu, but still couldn't see the dagger Qi Sha. Long Fei Yi laughed in a low voice, "It really is the metal of 10,000 poisons, you should have made your move earlier." Han Yunxi smiled helplessly, everything just happened too suddenly, and she really forgot about it. She was now in the second stage of the poison storage space, and could only store poisons that were a threat to her. But if it was the metal of 10,000 poisons, there were no restrictions. She didn't even know that she had a poison storage space, and she already stored a pool of water of 10,000 poisons. So, think about it the other way around. If this dagger Chi Sha could be stored in her poison storage space, then it must be the metal of 10,000 poisons. Han Yunxi whispered, "It really is it, I finally got it." Unable to find the dagger Chi Sha, the one-armed man was already in despair. He glanced at Gu, murderous intent rising in his eyes. But before he could make a move, Long Feiyi protected Han Yunxi and landed in front of Gu, cold eyes staring at the one-armed man. "I promise I'll tell you everything, please believe me." Han Yunxi knew that the poison was about to take effect. She was about to save him, but Long Feiyi, you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.